Okay, I think we're live. This is Comic Book Addicts, the catching up with Wednesday Serial Edition. Matt and I have been trying. Oh, sorry, Matt, you should be able to say hi. I'm talking.
Oh, hello, Internet.
Matt and I have been trying, I've been discussing having hangouts or doing a podcast or something for about 4 months now while I keep putting him off because I can't get my schedule together. But just by luck, you weren't doing anything on a Friday night, so I was able to grab you at last. Or you were able to grab me.
Whoa.
I'm opening a
Guinness.
Guinness. Guinness is my wintertime beer.
Oh. Yeah, I'm drinking a blood orange IPA, which should be more of a summer thing, I guess.
Yeah, but that sounds good. I've never had a blood orange IPA. Is it very bitter?
It tastes like an IPA. You can't really get much of the fruit in there.
I mean, some fruit ales are kind of on the sweet side, but then there's others like where they put grapefruit juice in it or something to make it extra bitter.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the bitter.
It depends how it's done. I judge a beer after I drink it, and you're in Portland, so you're in kind of a similar area. I just try new things. I'll go for whatever's on sale, basically, and that's how I discern it. I got this beer because it was $8 for a 6-pack and not $10.
Hey, we have our first person in the live chat. It's my old buddy Brian from Florida. Must be late your time, Brian. We are just having kind of a general chat and letting people listen in if they want. We will be talking comic books mostly. So I'm really glad you joined us. You don't have in Colorado this store Ollie's that everyone's buying DC trades for almost $0, are you? Do you, Matt?
No, that'd be wonderful. I've never even heard of it.
Howler Mouse went there 3 times, made 3 different videos, and then Brian has made a video where he spent, what was it, $108 or something, and got like $700 or $800 worth of hardback trades or something.
Jeez, well, kudos, man. I'll have to check that out.
It's like a 90% off sale or something.
Yeah, I'd love to. So that's something that's actually
here, by the way. You're another.
Oh, hey, Gretzky. It's like my oldest fan by follower. Not, I don't know how old he is.
He follows you, but in a non-fanish way. Mr. Gretzky has 6 Ollies. I wonder where. And Mr. Gretzky, did you go to Ollie's? And Jack Yo went to Ollie's today. So everyone in regions with Ollie's is like cleaning up on the trades.
Okay, how do you spell this? I'm gonna look it up right now. ALIS?
OLLIES?
I was way off. Ollie's bargain outlet. I'm guessing.
That's probably it. I checked and there's nothing anywhere near me. I mean, not even in Idaho.
Let's see. Oh. It's looking like the nearest one to me would be in... What's that, Ohio?
That's pretty far away. Colorado to Ohio. So it must be mostly just all along the East Coast.
Yeah, looks like.
Well, Brian says he spent $120 for 520 worth of trades. So that's
nice.
That's about 80% off. I thought maybe it was even more. Because some of them, the hardbacks, like he was getting these hardback archive editions that were really amazing. And Howler Mouse was getting some of those too.
It looks like it's about a 18-hour drive. So, yeah.
That would be worth it.
Yeah, there's a weekend.
Ditko is in Kentucky, so probably the eastern third of the country has this Ollie's. I don't know.
Huh.
Although I don't know how far towards the middle. Kentucky's pretty towards the middle of the country. Anyway, still far away from us.
Yeah.
Mind the Comics is with us. He's in Portugal, so I bet he does not have an Ollie's to buy 80% off trades.
All right. So, what's the last thing you read?
I was in the mid. I was trying to read this, which I picked up today in my second dropping off at a comic book shop of the week. Today, on my way home from work, I dropped off at a comic book shop, and I got the 2 issues of The Thing and The Human Torch that are out. I think mostly because I love this cover so much, and I saw they had both issues. I just grabbed it. Nice. This is obviously an homage to the first issue of the Fantastic Four.
Which is weird they do it on issue 2. I mean, I guess that's a 2-in-1, so they want to make 2 the number.
It is weird they do it on issue 2. And issue 1's cover looks more generic. I don't know if this is the standard cover on both of them. Yeah, it is the standard cover on both of them. So I only got to start this. The art by Jim Chung, who I don't think is an artist I've liked before, was really good. And I'm still iffy on Chip Zdarsky. I think because you're starting to like Chip Zdarsky, I thought I'd give this a try, although you're reading Spider-Man by Chip Zdarsky. And
spectacular. And I got to say, the first few issues with him, I was not feeling it. And then...
Was it because he was trying too hard to be funny?
That sums it up, yeah.
Because his humor didn't work for me, and like I tried reading him in Howard the Duck.
Okay.
Yeah, so sorry, just to go back to the Ollie's thing, Infrared Media, Brian says the archive editions were $6.99, which must be like 12% of the original cost of those $50, $60, $70 archive editions.
There's 2 archives I want to get, but they're at a price point that I couldn't justify, because the only comic shop I have within an hour of me anymore is the comic shop I go to, and they have a few DC archives, and they're all full price.
Right. They don't give you discounts at that store, right?
I literally talked to the shop owner about it, and he's like, you might want to check out Amazon. Like,
that is not good business.
Bad, yeah. He's willing to be a little more canned with me than he is other people, though, so...
Well, you might want to check out In-Stock Trades.
I did. They don't have it.
Oh, huh.
Because what I'm looking for is there's 2 trades that a lot of old Ditko stuff is, and they're not actually DC. They're old... I
know what you mean, because I saw them showing them. DC published them, but they were originally...
Charlton?
Charlton.
Right? Yeah. And
early Charlton Ditko superheroes.
It's like the only time they were reprinted. Like, I want to see the original Question comic and not, the original Danny O'Neill DC first appearance. Like, I want to see the Ditko one. And what I wanted to do is go back and read some of these Ditko oddities. And this is the only time they've been reprinted. And I find that bizarre. It's Steve Ditko. How is this stuff not at least more available?
Oh, that reminds me. I bought you a copy of Mr. A, but I haven't sent it to you.
Oh, cool.
So you have a copy, but it's not in your state.
I just kickstarted the last Mr. A.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep talking.
Oh, yeah. So I hope I'm showing up better. For those who
has that know, Mr. A come out yet? The Mr. A that you kickstarted?
It's been... I signed up for this Kickstarter for the most recent Mr. A since finding out that was a thing. They've done it for at least a couple now. And as they're shipping it, they're literally like announcing when they ship 5, they'll name like, oh, we shipped to 5 places. And I'm like, just ship it to me.
Right. Dingus. So I guess I must have kickstarted the last Mr. A because I didn't even know. You would think since I've kickstarted several Ditko comics, they would be sending me emails letting me know when the next Kickstarter is, but they don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's not even hard selling. That's just, you bought the last one, you probably want the next one. It's a comic book.
It's just common sense. And I think that Kickstarter even helps you with your...
Yeah, because they want to improve engagement.
I got you this black and white version. It doesn't have the color cover, basically.
Oh, that's cool. If it's just a cover.
I need to compare it to mine. That's one reason I didn't send it to you right away, because I wanted to compare it to mine to make sure it really was a reprint of the original issue. But that definitely looks familiar.
That looks crazy.
Yeah.
I'm curious, and I've been wanting to dig in, and a huge part of this has been something I've talked about with some people, but not so much on videos, is trying to understand more, because the whole political debate with comics has kind of risen. Right. I want to understand different viewpoints better, and I've realized I've always considered comics to be a fairly liberal thing. Like, I always considered Spider-Man to be a liberal character by all accounts, and I know I'm not alone, but it was kind of shoved in my face with a Spider-Man podcast I listened to that's now called the All New Amazing Spider Talk, that Ditko was an objectivist. He was, I'd say, conservative. Hey, Robocop.
I got one of these desks with a motor in it that rises it up and down. Sorry about that.
I want one.
I love it. Yet. I just got it a few days ago, actually. Part of my trying to work towards leaving my job and working at home. But yeah, so Ditko was an objectivist, and I don't 100% understand. Like, Ayn Rand was apparently an objectivist.
Well, she kind of created the movement, yeah.
And I haven't read Ayn Rand, but from what I hear people talking about Ayn Rand, it doesn't seem the same as what I read in Mr. A.
That's part of it too, is like, I think he's an objectivist on some level, but I think his interpretation of what that meant is maybe different than the way people kind of condemn Ayn Rand for doing it. And I don't know how direct it is in his characters. I know Mr. A is the most direct.
Well, let's be clear. Some people condemn Ayn Rand. Other people are deeply inspired by her. So,
touche.
And he may have been inspired by her. I don't know. I don't know where he got his objectivism. I assume she's the popularizer of objectivism. I assume there were other real philosophers and other people who came up with it before her, but I haven't looked into it.
Normally when I hear about it, she's the one credited. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I should look into it more, but all her I don't feel like reading giant fat novels just to find out what she thought.
That's fair. I'm sure The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged is on audiobook.
If Steve Ditko would do an Ayn Rand summary comic, or maybe he has.
But yeah, write him a letter. Throw him a request.
His version of objectivism, as I understand it, is there's no shades of gray, and you are what you are. What you do is what you are. You're responsible for your actions. There's no excuses.
And what's hilarious to me about this is, like, I'm trying to frame it like, so Steve Ditko wasn't just the artist on Spider-Man, and we could talk about the Jack Kirby, whether he had influence over the art.
But he was clearly the plotter, and eventually was given the plot credit, even, which Jack Kirby.
The last handful of the Amazing Spider-Man, he was either having heavy influence on for the issues he was on, or he was credited, and Stan Lee kind of had some stuff where there's enough accounts of the last few issues that basically it was Steve Ditko's comic for at least a few issues till he was pulled off. Though the reasons why, when you actually look into it, are a bit more nebulous.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
sometimes he's been quoted as saying he really left because of the publisher, not because of Stan Lee.
Yeah, I've heard so many different accounts. I don't know, because it's very clear by all accounts when brought together that him and Stan Lee had a rift, and that was part of it. And but people have said, like, a lot of it's over the final issue, or the issue right before he left, where the Green Goblin's revealed to be Norman Osborn.
Right. I've often read that he was upset. He did not want Norman Osborn to be, and that somehow fit in with his philosophy of good and evil, but I can't remember the reasoning. Yeah.
The idea is, if you look at, or at least of the time, when you looked at the statistics, the chances that you knew a perpetrator of a violent crime like that upon you would not be someone you knew.
Right.
I don't think that lines up as well anymore. Also, like, so what, it's a comic, so what, it's drama. But the weird part about it is, if you read the comics, like, there is a mystery set up, and when you kind of break it down, there was a few options, but the Green Goblin was going to be revealed as someone we knew. Like, that was because they had just done the Master Planner, and that was revealed to be some schmuck. So,
well, since I've researched Kirby a lot more than Ditko, although I'd like to learn more Ditko, but I imagine I think often Kirby had an idea in his mind. Like, in his mind, the Silver Surfer was very alien and did not have human neuroses and problems.
mm-hmm.
And he was very upset when Stan Lee turned him into kind of the king of angst, or whatever he became. And so if you're the one who's kind of plotting these things out and drawing them, and you have an idea in your mind, and constantly it might be that at some point it's just too much. You know, Steve Ditko said, I don't want to have someone else have control.
Well, and so there's so many parallels.
One of my ideas.
Yeah, there's so many parallels with, I feel like, the difficulties Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko have noted with their time when working with Stan Lee, that I'm feeling like there's a common factor here.
Right. Well, you know what? Even if, for us, I think it was great that Stan Lee made Norman Osborn the villain. You know, that has been a very rich vein. So I would say that Stan Lee might have been a great editor / rewriter.
Like, okay,
but not
so I've come
primal creator of ideas.
We've talked about this, but I've come full circle, because I used to be like, you know, Stan Lee's about the only name in comics I really knew from yesteryear. And then partially because of you, you know, I started learning more about Kirby and reading all this stuff and thinking, well, Stan Lee sounds like a big, giant jerk. Right. But the more I look into it and the more I hear accounts, like, Kirby, I think Kirby sounds relatively decent to work with. Most everyone else you hear, like, Kirby was king and he cared about comics and he would push people to do better, but in the most, like, aggrandizing way. I mean, that's not to say he didn't push, but I mean, there has to be some, but, like, he sounds like the king. Right. But Ditko sounds like he'd be a bitch to work with too.
Right. Kirby wrote in, I don't remember which issue of Mr. Miracle. I feel like as a Kirby nerd, I should know the issue. But in one of the earlier issues of Mr. Miracle, he spoofed Stan Lee as the funky Flash Man and Roy Thomas as House Roy, Funky Flashman's flunky. And it was vicious. And Steve Ditko has just been quiet. He just quietly went off and did his own thing. So I feel that Steve Ditko was less petty than Jack Kirby. I think was a great person, very generous to other artists and other people who wanted to be comic book creators. But I think he was also very bitter against, and you know, maybe he had the right to be, but anyway, he was very publicly bitter against Stan Lee at times.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, there's clearly some rifts, and I feel like there's some big egos, and I feel like some stuff grew in a way that nobody expected to, which is a common cause for rifts between creators, especially with comic properties. Like, I can't think of any comic property that grew where there isn't kind of some sort of rift between co-creators. Not that I can think of that many. And most hilariously, Spawn.
You know, that Steve Ditko is still doing these comics. He is a pure soul. I mean, in a way, he just does his work and he keeps going. Apparently will not sell his artwork, even though he could make a lot of money selling original artwork. He just cares about what he cares about, and he's not letting other people get him off track or whatever.
Well, and really to
idealize that.
And in a culture right now where, when we're talking about comics of the industry, that how much weight's put on what sold what on this month, and less on, but was it good? Here's a guy that cares about the art form, the craft, and is just doing it hell or high water. These
Right.
are
When they kickstart these, they make like $4,000. I think
and I mean,
on the
yeah,
Kickstarter I was in, it was either $4,000 or $5,000. I was like, my goodness, this is a new Steve Ditko comic, and only these few people are supporting it for a few dollars.
yeah, for almost any comic to like publish it and do it and get some money to the people involved and have it distributed on a national scale, especially when you're doing all the distribution and publishing yourself, essentially.
Right.
Like $4,000 is modest to say the least.
Right.
And this is a 90-year-old man doing this who's a legend of the industry. Like,
just
there are
names he
names.
could make doing variant covers.
He could make $4,000 doing a variant cover,
or maybe even more. I mean, think
yeah.
Think how wild people would go over a new Steve Ditko variant cover on Spider-Man or something.
Like, I'd honestly argue, like, for his family or estate, like the fact that he doesn't do one, because if he pushed it and did one for as much as he could get, I'm wondering what that figure would be.
Hopefully there's a mother load, if he has children or grandchildren, hopefully there's a mother load of original art piled up in his apartment that when he dies, they can either start a museum or make some money off of it, or a little of both.
I mean, on one hand, I'd love to see it. On the other hand, I'm kind of like, the dude didn't want people to see this, whatever, and he's still releasing stuff. Like, so on some level, like, maybe respect his wishes. Like,
well, but if the original art exists, why not, after his death, have it something? I mean, my ideal, in a museum, probably in Europe, where they actually care about people like him. I have that book. I think I showed it before about. That was a catalog from a Steve Ditko show in Spain. And it's this giant hardcover book with long academic treatises on Steve Ditko in it. I need to finish reading that, actually, because I only got up to his career from about 1958 or so. Oh, see you later, Brian. If you can't come back, you can always catch us on the rewind.
Speaking of reading, I made a investment in some novels related to well, not novels, but books related to comics that I thought you'd get a kick out of. So I have this one, 100 things Spider fans should know and do before they die, which is effectively a talk about like 100 like issues or runs with a couple oddities thrown in.
You should go to this part of Brooklyn or Queens or something like that.
I think there's like one of those, but yeah, I mean, I got that. And then I have these 3, much in the same vein, but it's comic creators on X-Men and Fantastic Four and Spider-Man. And it's just like these written interviews with creators from the books. And it's
that sounds really fun.
Yeah. And then I have...
Is it creators who were on the books, or does it include creators who weren't doing Fantastic Four or X-Men, but their thoughts on them?
No. It's all creators that were on the book. So, like, let's see here. For the Spider-Man one, it's Stan Lee. All of them have Stan Lee.
Right.
Let's see here. Bendis, Mark Buckingham, Todd McFarlane, Mark Bagley, Ron Frenz, John Romita. I guess it can't be the first one, is it? Isn't it John Romita Sr.?
He's
like passed for a while.
He's either still alive or only recently passed away. I think he's still alive.
Okay, that's good to hear. I for some reason thought he had passed.
While you continue to read the
Sal Buscema, Gary Conway, Roger Stern, Howard Mackey. I'm going to mispronounce this one. David Michelin.
Michelini, I think is his
name's
pronounced.
Dave Mateus, Marv Wolfman, Paul Jacobs, Len Wein. Like, I know I'm just rattling here, but like
several of those people are dead.
Now, I mean, when was this published?
Sal Buscema is dead.
Oh, this is edited by DeFalco. So.
Or maybe is Sal Buscema dead? I think he's dead. John Romita is still alive, and he's 88 years old.
Good for him. I don't know why he sounded weird. Like, great.
Since he was always the art director at Marvel, I assume he had a nice pension and everything, unlike most artists.
Okay. So this was 2004, so
Sal Buscema was definitely alive. Even I remember reading comics drawn by him in 2011.
Len Wein.
Len Wein died very recently. Is it Wine or Ween? I never know.
Don't ask me. But yeah, I don't know. Speaking of all, I don't know. My comic reading has been schizophrenic lately, but very focused on Marvel.
Well, so we went off on a tangent. We were talking about Chip Zdarsky on Spider-Man, and so didn't like him at first.
Yeah, no, you summed it up.
Edward from Chicago is on, or Edward 2962.
Oh, I didn't know it was Chicago for you. Hey,
I think he's from Chicago. You're from Chicago, right, Edward?
I mean, he's one of my oldest followers as well.
He's your nemesis? No, what did you say?
No.
I just watched an Edward video today on his latest comic book.
I haven't gotten to it yet. No spoilers. What do you talk about?
I'm drinking a Guinness, Ed. I think Ed drinks Foster's. I think that's what he drank last.
Oh, man. Ed, -1 point.
I loved Foster's when I was in college. If you were old enough, like Ed and I are, you can remember when Foster's was about the only good imported beer you could get.
Oh, man.
Ed is from Chicago.
Man, I didn't. When I went to C2E2, I should have tried to
pay attention. The clues are in his videos that he lives in Chicago.
Probably. I probably knew he lived in Chicago because something we met through was Chicago related.
You've been online so long you've forgotten everything you've learned.
Oh God, I don't pay enough attention, I guess. I don't know. I just don't focus. Yeah, I'm trying to think of maybe other stuff I read so we can keep
Zdarsky got better was it because he stopped being humorous so much?
It's not that he stopped being funny, it's that he stopped trying to insert jokes when it didn't matter and tried to write a good comic first and work the humor in around it, which is where Spider-Man needs to be with the humor, no question.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, he brought in the Peter Parker half-sister deal, which I don't think anyone's a fan of.
Right. I heard an interview with him where he said that writing was just the side thing that he did on the weekends, and he's still drawing all day long on weekdays. And I felt a little nervous about that as he's taking over more and more Marvel comics if he's not like putting his all into it. And when so I've only read half of this issue. So I kind of feel like the issue feels like he's warming up. He's kind of making these statements about the character, but not in a very entertaining, interesting way. As if you wrote down character notes. So here's a beat, here's what Ben Grimm is about, and here's what Johnny Storm is about, and here's what Dr. Doom is about right now. And it's just there on the page, so to speak, rather than artfully wrapped up in the story so well. But maybe it'll get better once he gets past that.
Maybe. The part of the problem is like you definitively have half the Fantastic Four, and that's looming over that book.
And if you never had read the Fantastic Four, this would be a nice starting point. It tells you everything. But just kind of, I mean, the artist makes it look interesting, but and Ben Grimm wears a pince-nez, if you know what that is, one of those little things you wear on your nose for glasses to read with, apparently. I thought that was funny. But yeah, like this page is a quick review of who the Fantastic Four were and that kind of thing. But anyway, so maybe it takes him a while to warm up to a book, and now maybe he'll do the same with this that he was doing with Spider-Man.
What's he drawing then? Because I don't know.
Sex criminals. But he may also do all kinds of commercial work, I suspect.
Okay. Cool. That's part of what got me when he was starting Spider-Man. Is everyone's like, "Oh, he's so good. He does like sex criminals, and then he did Howard the Duck and Jughead." And I was like, "Okay, so he's written 2 of those, and Howard the Duck and Jughead is not selling me on him doing Spider-Man."
And his Jughead was weak. It got much better. I read some of it with my daughter. It got much better when the writer of Squirrel Girl took over.
Oh, cool.
So Comic Book Aesthete has joined us. That's Ron. And Edward says he's going to post another video tomorrow of him opening a grab bag.
All right.
But it's a long video. Jack Yo says that he really liked the first 2 issues of 2-in-1. And I can't really judge it having only read half an issue. And the Comic Book Aesthete said that he's a big fan of the old 2-in-1. And yes, the old 2-in-1 has a strong nostalgic pull for me.
When did that end? Ish.
I would assume mid 80s, late 80s.
Okay, yeah.
It went on a long time. Well, first there was Marvel 2-in-1, and then it spun out into a solo comic about the Thing.
Yeah, okay.
That was written for a long time by John Byrne. The funny thing is to think that once upon a time, Ben Grimm was like the Wolverine. He was the character they would put in as many books as possible because he was so popular.
But nowhere near as many.
No, they didn't back then. If they gave someone 2 books, that was,
huge.
It took them a huge amount of time to realize they should put Spider-Man in 2 books, even though he was their most popular character.
Well, weren't they just double shipping Amazing for a while, and then they decided to split it?
I don't know, but when did Spectacular Spider-Man start? Late 70s or early 80s?
I'd have to look it up.
But Spider-Man was their best-selling character probably since the mid-60s. It took them all that time. Well, they had Marvel 2-in-1. Marvel Team Up was usually with Spider-Man.
I found out that was part of the Spider Office, actually. Yeah.
But I don't think there was a Spider Office back then, because there was Spider-Man and there was Marvel Team Up.
I'm thinking of an interview where I think it was Ron Friends talking about it. So later, I guess. But the idea that Marvel Team Up was in the Spider Office, I think, is telling.
Later on, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably by the Jim Shooter days, they started Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah. And then how long was it from Spectacular to... well, I guess it was Peter Parker the Spectacular. What was the third one? The third one was just...
Web of Spider-Man?
Which was 90s, so...
Was there Web of Spider-Man?
Yeah, there was. Shoot, that's right. I forget about that one because that's one they haven't drugged back.
Right.
And then for a while there was Sensational, which actually was one of my favorites for a while. But
when would Sensational? Is that the 2000s?
Sensational?
I thought you just said Sensational Spider-Man was a favorite of yours.
Yeah. Yeah, that was 90s. 2000s, barely.
RB3. Hi, RB3. I don't think I'm familiar with you, but he says Web of Spider-Man was 1985.
Oh, okay. I'm glad someone knows.
I think they started to realize, but I suspect Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, probably was 79 or 80. I'm afraid to check, but is the current one more Peter Parker focused? Is it Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, or?
I don't know. It's weird because the status quo in both the books is slightly different. In Amazing, he's living at Mockingbird, Bobby's apartment, and in Spectacular kind of has his own crib where his sister's hanging out, and then in Spectacular he's talking with Jonah and he's revealed himself to Jonah as being Spider-Man, and then in Amazing he's dealing with Robbie as his boss. And I don't know. I wouldn't say it's more Peter Parker at this point. It's just so weird to me that they have a different status quo.
That is
in
weird.
2 books concurrently when all they have to do to reconcile it is just, in Amazing, put him in his own apartment and then maybe just mention Jonah like really quickly, and that's all they have to do.
So I'm just going to read the comments. So Mr. Gretzky also agrees Web of Spider-Man was 80s. Edward says the last USA Avengers had a fun issue that was a spoof of Archie, as well as goofing on all these alt-right guys mad at changing things and adding minorities, etc., to modern comics. So there is proof that they are trying to rile up the acronym guys that I can't remember at the moment. And RB3 used to sneak the Web of Spider-Man into church and hide it behind the hymns to read.
But Amazing Spider-Man, you can just read out in the open, or?
I think that's it, yeah, because it's more canon.
Yeah, exactly.
A comic book aesthete used to do lots of naughty stuff in church, LOL.
I believe that.
I used to just look around at the girls in church, but...
I didn't have to go.
And Gretzky mentioned Spider-Man 2099.
Yeah, that's kind of a...
It broke up.
Wait, who broke up?
Bobby and Peter? I don't know. Was he dating someone?
Oh, I haven't read the last issue, so maybe that's when. Spoilers.
RB30 would have been banished if he was caught. Or banished for reading Spider-Man.
The Devil's Plaything.
Well, I was wrong. Spectacular Spider-Man. Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, started in 1976. And lasted until 1998.
Yeah. Yeah, like 190 something. Because when they brought back Spectacular, they got like 6 issues in, and they started renumbering, and it was like just inches away from the 100 mark.
3?
Yeah, like it was right next to 300. I'm shocked they didn't just carry it out that far, because even then, you know, they'd want to hit those milestones.
And then they did a Spectacular Spider-Man in 2003 through 2005. So the current one is volume 3.
Yeah, the legacy stuff's really revealed that they just need to stop that nonsense.
Yeah, well, they probably should just stick with whatever numbers they had, because I think they just confused a lot of people by...
Well, so, like, I don't mind that they actually do the new volumes. Like, I just wish they used it more intelligently. So, like, Mark Waid's Daredevil is a great example. There's a Mark Waid and Mark Samney took over, and then Mark Waid had this whole run. And then, like, at the last third of Mark Waid's run, they renumbered it. And then it just kind of ended, and then they kind of restarted again. It's like, if they just kept that Mark Waid's run as one run and then rebooted it, it would make sense, because, like, oh, here's a new creative, long-running team on Daredevil, and here's this one, here's this volume. It would make a logical sense.
Carlos Infante is here.
Hey!
It's been a long time. It's been a long time since Carlos has made videos. Carlos is a huge Superman fan, and I've been thinking of him as we've heard that Brian Michael Bendis will be taking over Superman with 3 Superman comics.
So it's Superman, Action, and Man of Steel they're dragging back?
Man of Steel is a 6-issue miniseries coming out for 6 weeks.
And that's going to be their origin retelling?
Origin retelling, yes. And... which Man of Steel was a miniseries in which John Byrne did an origin retell.
Right.
It almost feels like some of Marvel's gimmicks are moving over to DC with Bendis. I hope I'm wrong on that. But
the hilarious thing to me is, you know, it would be a small twist, but infinitely more fascinating to me, is Superman Year 2.
Yeah. Well... what would happen in Superman Year 2?
You could deal with him making mistakes. Maybe someone dies and he feels bad about it because he realizes he could have done something, but he didn't realize how to do it because he was trying to save the criminal or something. You know, like, completely just screw the pooch and learn from it before he's super... I don't know. I just feel like there's something there. But
well, certainly early days of Superman beyond his origin would be interesting.
Yeah.
And Grant Morrison made a brief stab at it in New 52, but then kind of gave up very quickly in a Grant Morrison kind of scattered way. But
yeah, Krypton blowing up is now the least interesting part of Superman. Like, we've seen it, we've been there, we've done it a million times.
right. Well, and then I wonder, is it because I'm so old? Because I was excited when John Byrne did it when I was probably, I don't know, 24 or something. But now,
in my mind, though, that John Byrne retelling is the Superman origin. Like, he just took all the elements that built up and he distilled it into this perfect origin. And ever since then, like, people have tried to do stuff. And I know some people like Birthright. I just don't feel like there was anything added or necessary. Tried to bring in some of the Smallville stuff, but why? I don't know. Maybe different people feel differently. I know they do, in fact. But that John Byrne Superman was there at the right time when they were kind of restructuring what superheroes kind of meant in the 80s.
And it followed the Infinite Crisis, the Crisis on Infinite Earth stuff, where they're getting rid of Superboy, and so it was retelling Superman the way they wanted him to be. He becomes Superman as an adult, and was also not depowering him, but reeling back in his ridiculous powers.
Well, and also, up to that point, had Superman been the Superman origin been told in a way that was like somewhat, I mean, decompressed though by today's standards, not so much, but like done in that way. Whereas before, like, you didn't get the Krypton blowing up till issue whatever, and that was just one issue, and then.
Well, and you used to get it for, I think when they first told the story, it was like a page, and then maybe they did a 3-page version.
Right.
So I just want to say hi to Thomas Churchill, who's dropped in, and Mr. Gretzky says Bendis will ruin it. And I'm trying to be more optimistic than that. But my feeling of Bendis is he starts off well, and then I personally lose interest in what he's doing after a year or two. But he likes to stay on for years and years and years.
What I'm more curious about with Bendis moving was his supposedly creator-owned titles. Like, what happens with Powers? Most importantly to me, what happens to Scarlet? And I'm assuming they're just DOA.
Well, it said online that they're moving over to DC, and DC is going to start a special label just for him. I mean, they are really going. They are rolling out the carpet for him in a way that I don't think I've ever seen.
But why not put it on Vertigo? Like, they have the line that has prestige beyond.
I think because Vertigo doesn't give you all your rights anymore, and they don't want to. They want Vertigo to have this legal language that applies to everyone under Vertigo now, which is not as good as Vertigo used to be. So I think they're creating another special thing for him. And they also say they're going to have him, what's the word? Not valet, curate a pop-up line, just like Young Animals is a pop-up. Imprint, pop-up imprint. So he's gonna be like that rock star on Young Animals, and he's gonna curate his own mini line of comics along with writing those Superman comics. Mr. Gretzky, I agree. Byrne was awesome. That was a real sweet spot for me on Superman. Edward says the rumor I read was that Gary Conway wanted to do a Spider-Man. Oh, he's talking about Spectacular, I think, and wanted to do a Spider-Man comic. And when he got Ms. Marvel in '76, he was going to make it a Spider-Man spin-off comic, but then he got Spectacular. So that sounds like some deep history that I'll need to look into more. It's probably in one of my many not yet read issues of Back Issue Comics, the Tomorrow's comic, or Tomorrow's fanzine.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, Jack Yo said, just imagine the never-ending pages of talking heads at the Daily Planet. So the other thing that Bendis has announced is that the Superman title will be The Big Adventures, and Action will focus on Metropolis. So I assume it will focus on the Daily Planet a lot and build up all the characters there. So I think Jack is right that we will be seeing a lot of talking heads at the Daily Planet.
I'm curious, but like if Bendis was doing one Superman book, I think I'd be super interested. The fact that he's doing 3 at once just kind of kills it for me.
Yeah, I think I'm especially worried. Do I have to read all 3 Bendis Superman comics, or can I just buy one? I think I always say this and then I break down and buy individual issues, but I think I'll wait for trade on them.
I'll see. I might have to pick some up out of just sheer curiosity. Speaking of some of that shuffling, though, Slot's leaving Spider-Man to go do Iron Man, and I'm wondering if I'm going to give Iron Man a shot.
Well, so you've gone through some evolutions with Slot, because at times you've hated him and then you've come back to liking him.
I found out what it was. Slot is a very good writer, but he sucks at these transitions. And he's dealt with so many major transitions that it kept popping up. But the only issues that really sans a few filler issues. The transitions between these giant status quo shifts, he handled very poorly.
Right.
But after that, once he gets in it to tell the story that he wanted to do with that transition shift, then we're all right.
Okay, the desk is coming down again.
All right.
There we go. I'm living in the future.
There's the question, though. Who do you want on Amazing Spider-Man? Who would get you to pick up that book?
For me, someone pretty radical like Jason Aaron or Donny Cates. I'm really enjoying the Donny Cates comics I'm reading right now.
Aaron feels so safe to me.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way?
He feels like he's the biggest name at Marvel left.
Well, he is the biggest name at Marvel left, but he's kind of, I don't know. He's kind of does the overmatch. Well, he's doing the female Thor, but he does the kind of macho-y kind of corners of, I don't know, or the
he's fantasy range.
Maybe he's more the fantasy X-Men writer. Although I guess he did do an X-Men title at one point. I never read that.
He's done a bit of X-Men because he did the whole, I think, like Schism was him, I believe.
I didn't realize that. But he did this Wolverine and the X-Men comic a while back, where Wolverine was the headmaster of the school.
Right. But I mean, it was a lighter book. Like, it really took the idea that it was a school, played with that. It played with all kinds of X-Men mythos. He's been around. He has range. I'll grant him that. For me, the guy I want to see writing it, because not that it has to be a guy, just the person that I want to see the most right now is Dennis Hopeless.
And I have not read a single Dennis Hopeless comic that I can recall. He did Spider-Woman, right? And everyone loved that.
Yeah.
Everyone he read it, loved it. I suspect a lot of people didn't read it, but
he's just wrapping up his run on Jean Grey now that Phoenix is back. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else he's doing or what's next, but I just feel like
you've been reading Jean Grey.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been like one of your favorite comics?
Not one of my favorites, but I mean, with what you can work with there, he did a really fascinating thing with it, I think, and made it fun and interesting and evolved it. And most interestingly, he contrasted this young Jean Grey with Hope Summers and showed how different those characters were, which I have to admit, in my mind, were very similar, And
okay, well, Comic Aesthete just blew my mind. He said Amazing Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman.
Yeah.
I have no idea what Jonathan Hickman would do with it, but that would intrigue me because it would be such a surprise choice.
I mean, Hickman basically did at least an issue of Spider-Man with one of the was it? It was FF, but it wasn't Fantastic Four. It was the Future Foundation.
Oh, right. Spider-Man was in the Future Foundation.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he could chop it, but does he even write for Marvel anymore? I thought he bounced.
There keeps being rumors that he's going to come over to DC, and rumors he's going to come back to Marvel, but at the moment he doesn't write there. So Jay Rocks, hey Jay, long time no see. Or I think Jay still occasionally does videos, but not too often. He says Jason Aaron should write Conan. I would be shocked if Jason Aaron does not write Conan when Conan comes back to Marvel.
Oh, that's right. He's coming back to Marvel, which is bizarre. I forgot they're still doing Conan, and then that's another thing that's getting lifted from Dark Horse and going to Marvel.
I know. The Dark Horse is losing everything to Marvel. They don't.
They're getting screwed. And again, it kills me for the same reason. They've been keeping this franchise that's popular, but I mean, they've been pumping creators into it and like keeping the love going in a comic form, but everyone's getting pumped because Marvel's going to publish it. And I'm like, if you love those characters, read what's being done. Don't.
Right. Well, I did not like the Cullen Bunn Conan, and I dropped that. So to me, the only good news is someone else can try doing Conan, but
I'm not gonna. Your love of Conan is true. I'm not gonna.
So I'm kind of, if Jason Aaron does write Conan, I think that could be very interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll stay on Conan or what's up with Jason Aaron. How much longer he's going to stay at Marvel might be although I guess his indie books are not big commercial hits. They're more odd nooks and crannies of indie books, like was it Southern Bastards and The Goddamned. So maybe he needs to keep doing Marvel comics too. Count Von Strange the Fourth is here. I think the Count lives somewhere out in rural Illinois. So we got someone from Chicago, someone from rural Illinois. He's done awesome videos showing where he lives with his what do you call those? With his drone. Lots of other great comic book videos too. Let's see. I'm gonna look through the. Jack Yo says he'll give Iron Man a shot for 2 or 3 issues. Comic Book Aesthete, after suggesting Hickman for Spider-Man, also suggested Fraction for Spider-Man. I think Fraction not only left Marvel and is doing a few Image comics, but is mostly writing for Hollywood now, is my impression.
Yes,
he and his wife started a production company, and neither of them are producing many comics anymore.
Huh. Which is a shame, because Fraction is a lot of people's, one of their guys.
And RB3 says that he's in Las Vegas, Nevada, at least if I'm understanding that. J-Rock saw some of my old Conan videos. Yeah, I am very, very into Conan. But I don't buy every Conan series because they're up and down, and I have so many. I still have a ton of Savage Sword of Conan I need to read from the 70s and 80s.
You just got that, though, right? That haul?
Yeah, did I show it on Twitter or something? I think I did show it on Twitter, but I haven't done a video about it. I got 62 issues of Savage Sword of Conan all at once.
All right.
Some of them are duplicates, so I could send you some if you want.
I've told you I'm willing to do a Conan video with you. You just have to tell me what I
just don't know what read. Well, I think if we were to do a Conan video, I'd like to read like the early Marvel run when Barry Windsor Smith was on it.
And I bet I could procure a way to read
that. Yes. I can send you cheap reprints of some of those, but I don't have all of them in reprints. Let's see. Max Washington has joined us. Great musician and songwriter living in Queens, I think. Queens, New York. Is that right, Max? I think Queens. I thought before he lived in Brooklyn because I just assumed everyone lives in Brooklyn. Let's see, is anyone else? Yeah, so we got 16 viewers.
Nice, that's about as much as I had.
So earlier in the chat, Edward was talking about Bon Jovi. I'm not quite sure why. I was right. Max is living in Queens, close to where Peter Parker lives. And Thomas Churchill said, "Did you guys read Savage Tales?" I have most of the issues of Savage Tales, except I haven't been willing to pull the trigger on #1, which is very expensive. I found Savage Tales #2 for like $5 last summer in Maine. I even asked the shop owner, "Are you sure you want to sell this for $5?" And he said, "Yeah, no one wants to buy it," which I found very shocking.
Wow. Now, I own one Conan trade, and it's written by Fred Van Lente. So,
ooh, that was a bad run too. I mean, I shouldn't say bad. It was an okay run. There's nothing to write home about. But Savage Tales and the early Savage Sword of Conan just have such amazing artwork. And Roy Thomas was still really into the character of Conan. You know, he really cared about it. He wasn't just writing for the dollar. Later on, I think Roy Thomas got a little tired of it, and his later Conan stories aren't as good. But anyway, that's talking about right over your head or under your feet.
It's a familiar story. It's like Claremont, right? With X-Men after a while.
Yeah, because Roy Thomas wrote Bat Avengers here. Roy Thomas must have written hundreds of Conan stories, hundreds and hundreds of them.
Nuts. Right.
You know, and later he came back to Marvel and wrote Conan, and that reminds me, because when we're talking about Ditko and Kirby, both of them came crawling back to Marvel later on and did less good work.
I mean, what's weird to remember is like Ditko is credited with all this stuff, but he was a contractor. He took the jobs that were put there for him to pay the bills.
Well, that's what he says. He says he's not going to complain. That was what the contract was, and so I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
But he was when he came back in the either late 70s or very early 80s to Marvel, he was definitely kind of phoning it in a lot of the time.
I mean, yeah, you weren't supposed to mention Spider-Man to him or anything, and it's just kind of a crazy, I don't know, it's a whole crazy ride, and it's fascinating to think there's all this mind space around what happened essentially between two people, you know.
Max, who's listening, probably still listening, wrote a letter to Ditko and got an answer back.
Nice.
So I think if you, after you get your Avenging Mr. A, write him a fan letter about, or a thoughtful letter that isn't about Spider-Man, about what you've been reading, and he'll probably write you back. I've kind of heard a lot of stories about him writing people letters.
Yeah, it's funny. He was actually really active with the fan community. He did fanzines and all that, but he just wouldn't do interviews or get his face out there or anything. He's a fascinating guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Thomas Churchill asks if I think they'll do a Red Sonja movie. They did once do a Red Sonja movie. It was very poor. I forget what the name of the actress was who played her, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did a movie again. It seems like the rights of the Conan characters have been split up. Like maybe different people have the rights to Red Sonja than have to Conan and to Kull, because I see them all at different publishers. So that's very strange.
That's just...
So I think Robert E. Howard, who killed himself like in 1934 or something, had no direct heirs. And I think he left what little estate he had to some doctor friend of his. And that doctor eventually sold it to someone else. And so eventually it just got split up and people sold different parts to different people. Brigitte Nelson played Red Sonja before. Thomas, did you see the Conan movie with the guy who plays Aquaman? What's that guy's name? Momoa. He played Conan in a Conan movie a few years ago that bombed, I think, but I kind of liked that movie. So Matt, are you, well, so you're kind of bothered by Bendis writing too many Superman comics. In general, are you interested in Bendis? And Bendis
is, I mean, there's a lot of Bendis stuff I like, you know. I mean, it's easy to point to Ultimate Spider-Man. I'm a big fan of his earlier work. I think the best thing he ever created was Torso.
I've never read that.
It's this account of Elliot Ness post the Untouchables era, but what happened was Elliot Ness, you know, from the fame of that, got moved to this essentially this Hooverville where there's this serial killer that was chopping people up and would only leave behind the torso. And with the crime fighting of the day meant the victims were unidentifiable. And since they're all in a Hooverville, they couldn't narrow it down by who was missing, essentially. So someone was murdering, and it was impossible to figure out because of all these factors. And so he was trying to figure it out, and he goes crazy. And the craziest part of this book is not fiction. I looked it up because I was like, how much of this is true? Elliot Ness set the Hooverville aflame, taking all these people who were essentially homeless, making them truly homeless and without resources, push them out to try to flush out this killer. And in the end, he was never fully able to suss it out. And he kind of died after a divorce and all this other stuff that was building up. But the part that's fiction actually is that this comic posits who the killer would be, which is one of the three strongest theories, just to wrap it up and have some narrative cohesion. But it's a really fascinating book that's, you know, historical fiction in the truest sense of the word. And right. It's one of the early Bendis books where he was on art duties as well. And I don't know, I think it's really fascinating. But I mean, that it's so hard to reconcile that Bendis creating that stuff out of just the sheer need to make comics into what he is today, where I know for a fact he's had people ghost write for him, whether or not that was his decision. Yeah. I was at some panel.
From his plots or just from straight ghostwriting with no
straight
work by him?
Straight ghostwriting. They were writing comics and it was done under Bendis's name, and they were trying to build up their careers. So they were playing along with the company way. And then they didn't really get any new assignments or anything, and they kind of moved on. But
oh, you had mentioned meeting a woman at a convention who did ghostwriting, but I'd never imagined it was for Bendis.
It was her and another guy in the room. Yeah, it was just part of coming up, I guess, is the way they saw it. I mean, I can't imagine doing that. I'd say fuck that, but I also have never been in that position. And if I said fuck that, they'd find someone else.
I find that kind of shocking that, I mean, Bendis is kind of
his name
himself as a Superman of writers, you know, who plans his issues out, you know, 30 issues ahead and all of that. So that's kind of disturbing.
I mean,
maybe that's why I lose interest in Bendis, because sometimes I'm not even reading Bendis.
Yeah, and I don't know how much that's Marvel editorial versus whatever, because Bendis's name sells. So,
well, but was it maybe Bendis was having her do it without telling Marvel?
No, I mean, this was clearly like understood, and they were in the office. It wasn't a hush hush secret. It's just when credits came due, they weren't getting their credit.
So whose idea was it? Was it Bendis's idea or Marvel's idea, do you think?
They were purposely vague about it, but they did say, you know, we were ghostwriting and they were for books under Bendis's
they thought
name.
that if they did this ghostwriting, then Marvel would eventually hire them to write under their own name.
Apparently it's relatively common.
That is weird.
I don't know how true that is. I just know that these people in front of me stated that, and it made sense to me, because I've definitely seen books that didn't feel like they were written by Bendis, but they had his name on it. So,
I mean, there are comics that say they're written by Stan Lee that I think modern recent comics that I don't think are written by Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone who really likes comics believes that. Like he did this character Chakra for what was it called? India Inc. or whatever, that this line
I heard about that.
comics that was trying to break into America. But obviously they just paid him for the name, and maybe he helped them come up with a few aspects of Chakra, because Chakra is kind of like Spider-Man. But Jack Yo says Nick Spencer wrote for Bendis early on, so that maybe the ghostwriting worked for Nick Spencer as a career route.
Yeah.
Omnitron has come in and said, "It is I, the Omnitron." And Untouchables with Costner was good. I'm just having trouble. People were talking about Jonah Hex. They're talking about Conan movies. Max Washington liked the Jonah Hex movie, but feels ashamed of it. I never watched the Jonah Hex movie. Maybe I should. Wow. So now you've just totally blown me away that it was Bendis who had the ghostwriter, and now I can't imagine.
Yeah. I don't know. But I mean, like, Bendis also wrote The One Time I Was Into the Avengers, and...
Right. Did he write it, though? Or how much of it did he write?
I'm pretty sure he wrote that.
One thing to like have someone who was your co-writer, and then you didn't give them credit, but you can say, well, the vast majority of it came from Bendis, and this person just helped me finish it. But I don't know.
And I mean, he did his Daredevil run and Jessica Jones. Like, there's a lot of Bendis I love.
Edward is right. It's nothing different from Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and there's a long tradition of people not getting credit in comics and other people signing it.
Yeah.
And in newspaper comic strips, they often have someone's signature who that person doesn't have anything to do with the comic anymore.
Jim Davis.
Frank Frazetta did Little Abner for years, apparently, and not the guy, whoever. I forgot the name of the Little Abner creator. But that was then, and this is now, right? Bendis is a celebrated writer for being a writer, and I'm feeling bitter and distressed.
It blew me away, but I've just kind of reconciled it to figuring, like, after the initial 6 issues of whatever Mighty Avengers run I was reading, and it felt like it just took a weird shift, but it was still on the book. I'm like, that was probably one of those, right? And then just a few other ones that just felt like they slapped his name on a book. Like, it's probably some of those too,
Right. You would think it would be good enough to just say he was the co-writer, say, by...
Yeah,
Nick Spencer, and people will still buy it because Bendis's name's on it, rather than, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it feels weird to me too. I'm like, why wouldn't you give credit to the person who's on it? Like, there's still some way to work in the name, but I don't get it.
That best-selling writer, James Patterson, have you heard of him? Novelist.
Heard of him?
I think he writes thrillers and stuff. And anyway, one of the moms of one of my daughter's acquaintances has ghost-written James Patterson novels, and his novels sell millions. But I think in that industry, it's a pretty open secret that he has a whole team of writers working on his books, because he produces like 6 novels a year or something.
How much do you have to write before you get ghostwriters? I just don't understand this.
Well, I think it's the economics. If your name will sell 2 million books and the other person... So in comics, the numbers are much smaller, but for James Patterson, it might be 2 million books. And if the person had just written the book by themselves, they might sell 10,000. So, the value of the name, potentially, of the biggest writers. Like I was talking about on Twitter, a lot of podcasts and things that I've been listening to, like the podcast for Publishers Weekly, which I have a love-hate affair with, but they talk all the time about how huge graphic novels are becoming in the book publishing world, and how it's shrinking in the comic book, Wednesday Warrior world. But if you went totally to the publishing model, a few people make millions in the regular book world, and the other people make teeny tiny amounts of money. Like in science fiction, I used to know people who would, this was 10 years ago, but they would get $5,000 or $7,000 for a novel. And the big novelists are getting millions. So in the normal comic book world, I think the difference between the hardworking artist or writer and the superstar artist and writer is not that great. Like the hardworking person still makes a living.
Well, because like if you're Scott Snyder and you're known for doing Batman, they still have to pay all the Batman royalties, and you're still playing with their toy. Like you're only flying so high.
Right. And, Scott Snyder may make a lot more than Pete Tomasi, but Pete Tomasi makes a living. But in kind of if it were like the world of novel publishing, Pete Tomasi might make $5,000 a year, and Scott Snyder might make $2 million a year.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know if I've been worrying every few years. I worry about whether comics are doomed, and I've been worrying about that again lately.
Yeah.
And not just because of Marvel. And I don't mean comics are doomed. I mean, floppies that are published every week might be on the way out.
Yeah, there's an industry there. Like, I feel like it could take a dive, and if it took a smart look at it, we might see some reduction on some stuff, but trying to push and be better to consumers in some ways, and that might help. But I mean, there's other stuff too, like variant covers make money, and so those are never going to go away.
Right, but maybe they're part of why the sales have gone down. And well, I've listened to a podcast with some retailers on it, and they're talking a lot about comics where they basically just get the comics that people asked for on their poll and don't even buy copies to put on the shelf. And lately I found it harder to find comics like Damage that I thought would be easy to find. I had to go to 5 comic book shops before I found copies.
Was it worth it?
Yes. My God.
Oh my God.
I mean, how often do you get? I've never had a fold-out cover exactly like this before.
I never have either, and now that they've done it, I see why.
I don't understand it at all.
It is. Does it hook up with other of these? I forget what the push is called, but like, does it hook up with like the silencer cover or something?
I have silencer here. Let me see if I can try to. You read silencer also, right?
Yeah. Just not physically.
Oh, okay.
So I don't have the.
Let's see.
Okay, so that's some trifle nonsense.
I can't show it to you guys easily. It does hook up. But so I guess you would get a giant poster if you rip out the covers of all your books. I can't.
Yeah, that sounds like an enticing offer. I get some people are for it.
The silencer, this rest of the cover actually, so this is kind of cool. The rest of the cover fits with it. In Damage, it's nonsensical. It's just 3 different.
There's like a leg.
Right.
Yeah, I don't.
There's a giant hand here holding Harley Quinn. I don't know what that's about, but maybe it's what's going to happen next issue in Damage. Damage was a weird one.
I didn't catch it.
I was wondering if this new line of DC Comics was Jim Lee's fantasy of bringing back the early 90s when he was the god of all comics. And that kind of matched it. But then Silencer actually was a good standard comic with, lots of panels and actual story going on, lots of 6-panel pages.
Yeah, no, that's a good comic. And for no short reason, because John Romita Jr.'s on it.
Right. So maybe because these are more artist driven, with the artist being involved with the plotting and doing the art before the writer does the dialogue. Maybe John Romita has a lot of experience doing that. he spent most of his career, he spent a couple decades anyway when they still did the Marvel method.
But who was on Damage? It was
Tony Daniel.
Tony S. Daniel. Yeah. Is Jim Lee doing one of these?
Jim Lee is doing one of them called The Immortal Men or something like that.
Okay.
But
so skip that.
Obviously, that has already been postponed by several months.
I don't care what anyone says. Jim Lee can't write.
Right. Yeah. And Jim Lee, in my mind, has bad ideas. At least he has since the New 52. I mean, all his redesigns of characters were horrible, I thought. And apparently he came up with the idea of Scooby-Doo Apocalypse.
Which you like, right?
No, I hate that one.
Stuff. But you've been reading most of the
Hanna-Barbera. I like, not Frankenstein. I like the
Snagglepuss?
Flintstones. Did you try reading Flintstones?
No. I haven't touched any of those. I have no interest. It's not for me.
You have to try the Flintstones. Do it your illegal way. The Flintstones are not what you think. Everybody who didn't pick up the Flintstones at first and later started buying it said, "Oh my God, I wish I had started from the beginning."
All right. Well, speaking of the state of the industry, though, and stuff people didn't pick up. So there's all this push for covers and all these books, but they're on to the 5th printing of Mr. Miracle #1 right now.
Holy cow. Wow.
Like, they so don't understand when they have a hit. They so don't understand that people are just looking for a good, interesting comic with some new concepts that when they get one, not only do they miss the first print, okay, then they miss a second print by a huge margin. Really? Then you miss a third print by a huge margin? Really?
Or you could say it's building steam and people keep saying, hearing how great it is and coming in and they want to buy the individual issues.
They can't, though, because they keep selling out.
Right.
And now it's at the point where if you don't have one, you're not getting two. And if you don't have two, you're not getting... And now it's like halfway done. And it's like they could have made sales. And in the way I push comic getting sales, people want to read the stories, so they buy it. No gimmicks, no weirdness.
Right, but they don't know what's going to happen, and they go by the orders they get from the shops.
Yeah, but 4th printing, it's not done yet. I don't know
what to tell you, but
I'm just saying, like, they're worried about sales, but here's something that will sell, and they're not selling it.
Modern printing technology, they can also turn around those printings very quickly.
Yeah.
To how it used to be.
And I don't really understand what's really the difference between a printing anymore. Like, I get having the second printing so people at their first printing can, sure. But really, what's the difference between a 3rd and 4th printing?
It's just that they need to print more, right?
I guess. Yeah.
I think it's a sign of this continuing success of the series that people are coming back and saying, "Hey, I want the early issues." So we got Liking the Covers here. Hey, Mr. Liking the Covers. We got JLS Comics. It's Jesse, I believe.
Nice.
He lives in Florida, I think. Do you have Ollie's down there, Jesse? Did you go to Ollie's and buy comics for almost nothing? That was a theme earlier in the show. We don't have Ollie's anywhere near either me or Matt, so we're left out in the cold. Well, so now I'm wondering, like, will the Jeff Lemire Terrifics be any good? Are you going to try that, or you're not a Jeff Lemire fan? I think
every time I try Jeff Lemire, there's been exceptions, like his Green Arrow. That's it. I just don't dig on him that much.
Right.
He's not my guy.
And Scott Snyder is doing Challengers of the Unknown. So both of those were tempting me.
Nothing DC's doing is really... Yeah. What am I picking up from DC right now? I'm getting Nightwing, and then the Nightwing mini just wrapped up, the New Order, that was fun.
Oh, I had paid no attention to that. I haven't heard anyone talk about it.
Yeah, that's actually kind of weird to me. Is it like by all rights that should have been a Batman mini, and they let it be a Nightwing mini. Especially doubly weird because Metal's going on right now with all the weird alternate universe stuff and all that, and this thing's just happening, not tying into any of that. So interesting. Just Nightwing kind of creates a world in which superheroes are kind of pushed aside, and then it turns out that's a bad thing, and his son helps him come around. That, I mean, I guess spoilers, but once you, if you didn't assume some of that by the end of the first issue, I don't know what you were thinking was going to happen. Have you been reading Nightwing proper now that the creators?
No, I dropped it a while ago, not because I didn't like it, but because I was getting too many comics and I had to drop something.
Yeah, I hear you.
I liked Tim Seeley as a writer, and he's writing something else that I was going to pick up. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, no, that's been going all right. What else? Birds of Prey, I get.
I'd been kind of wishing that Tom King would team back up with Tim Seeley. I think Batman would be better with the two of them rather than just Tom King. Although most people are very happy with Tom King.
I can't understand why. Me and another friend were just trying to do a podcast, and we picked the War of Jokes and Riddles, and I listened back on the recording a bit, and I purposely don't spit venom like that anymore, so I didn't want to put it out, but that is one of the worst written comics I've read in a while. And Doomsday Clock is a thing, so that's saying something.
Right.
Have you read Doomsday Clock?
No.
Like, I'm not a huge, like, I recognize Watchmen, I get it, but I mean, like, it was something that was left alone. And now, with what I've been talking about with following Ditko and learning about that, I realized Watchmen took, like, half Ditko characters and kind of just...
That's a good point, yeah.
Put a spin on it. And, God, Doomsday Clock is just a spin in the face. Like, it is... if it was just another DC comic, might have a few clever ideas, might be interesting. If they literally just didn't do Watchmen, but just did the Charlton characters that they own, that Watchmen was like, just played with that, because the only one you'd have to do some weird reconciliation for, which they wouldn't even have to, because that's not a character in Doomsday Clock, would be Black Canary, because Silk Spectre of the Watchmen analogs is about the only one they really use anymore.
Well, how much money has the Watchmen made DC in the past 30 years? I would have to guess $50 million or something like that. So they're going to say, it's amazing that Paul Levitz and whoever else kept them from capitalizing on that more, in a way. But it doesn't mean it's going to be good comics.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and that's been something I've been pressing to a lot of people, is this justification of, oh, it sells, so they have to do it. I don't care. Like, look, I understand at the end of the day, someone has to care about the business and all that. I'm not that guy. I care about if the comic's good. Is my money worth what I spent? There's some levels to consider that, and I don't know. I struggle with that when I talk reviews. But those are bad, and those are a spit in the face, and those are an insult, and it was not touched for so long that it became kind of a thing. They had left it alone. It was a graphic novel in its own right. And they did before Watchmen, which was dicey, and now they're doing this, and it's bad. It's no way justified. There's no reason for them to do it. Like, I'm reading it, and there's no reason for it. There's no justification. It's just, what if we did whatever? Like, honestly, they could have taken Wildstorm characters. They could have done this with Wildcats.
Right.
And it would have made more sense and been more interesting and allowed for more punching. I don't...
Right.
It just doesn't.
Yeah. No, there's nothing about it that sounds to me like it would be a good comic or a good idea for a comic. So I'm not buying it for that reason. I do have a little bit of righteousness about Alan Moore, even though there definitely are ways you could criticize Alan Moore. But
you could.
But mostly it's just, it doesn't really make sense as a good comic. And from what you told me, that is playing out, that it's not going to be a good comic.
I mean, to be fair, I am the person I know that's most negative about Doomsday Clock. Like, I hate it, and I feel like I'm saying things other people said. And I've talked about it with a few people, and they said, "Oh, you missed this or that." And I say, but I asked them what they meant, because I was talking to someone, I said, it's not really a political comic. Like, they're trying to dodge them. They said, "Oh, you missed this whole part about their world exploding with bombs." And I'm like, but that's not political. You know, them trying to stop the world from, that's not a political thing. The fact that politicians were involved does not inherently make it political. They somehow found a situation to involve politicians and not make it political. It's actually kind of a hat trick if you think about it in that light. And I don't see it. Like, all the elements that made Watchmen what it was are not present.
Well, the people I follow, a lot of them were talking about Doomsday Clock with issue 1, and I feel like it's all become quiet by issue 3. I don't hear much talk about it.
Yeah, I purposely haven't done a video yet because the 3rd issue got me riled up, but I'm like, there's a few things that I want to just nail, like treat like nails to the coffin, but it could go either way. Technically, I know it's not going to be in a way I like, but it may soften my take on it right now. But I don't think so.
So is just Matt showing up on the screen? Oh no, there I am. Okay, I just was peeking. It's weird how you can't really tell what the end result is while you're broadcasting.
Yeah, they do it weird.
Oh, and now I just accidentally closed my window with comments. There it is.
Yeah, we had a few notes about things in case we got stuck. Let's hear. Okay, so you haven't read X-Men Forever, right? So I don't know if the Jean Grey being reborn even.
The last I read was Bendis's run on X-Men, and I fizzled out on it after the event. I forget what the event was called, like Children of the Atom or something. So I really was loving it. I was reading the 2 different X-Men he was writing. And then there was a crossover thing, and I slowly just petered away after that.
Yeah.
So that's the last time I read X-Men. So a lot of X-Men has gone under the bridge since then.
A bit, but at the same time, not much, because they just had their big reboot, a la now that the Inhumans don't have to be the X-Men anymore.
Because they bought Sony.
Yeah, I guess. I don't. Which, there's a whole topic that I'm not comfortable with, the idea that Disney owns media, essentially.
Right.
Well,
and that's ultimately maybe Marvel's problem, is they're just owned by too big of a corporation. And Warner Brothers, because of the success of the Marvel movies, is now paying too much attention to DC too, probably.
Yeah, which I know there's a heightened Marvel versus DC war going on now that seems less friendly than I remember it. And
between the fans or between the pros?
Between the fans.
Oh, really? I haven't noticed that.
A lot of it's around the movies.
Oh, okay.
I find hilarious because, I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Marvel movies in aggregate. There's a handful of ones that I think are all right, though I've seen, I think, all of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe I missed one. And they're movies. I don't know, but DC is making these shockingly bad movies by nearly any metric. You have some bizarre defenders of them, like, no, this was a good decision because like Man of Steel, I think, is the most contentious. And I actually think their worst one, because you somehow screwed up making a Superman movie, which just shouldn't be that hard.
I feel like the Marvel movies captured something of the Marvel 60s, 70s, and 80s magic in them. Maybe not a lot of it, but enough that that's their charm. and that DC doesn't have some go-to kind of feeling for their movies.
Yeah.
That's my theory.
But I mean, they turned out Wonder Woman. I don't know.
Right. So they could have individual good movies, but they don't have an overall, like, you know, Marvel once upon a time had this coherent universe and kind of a coherent voice and sense of humor and everything. And the movies, the Marvel movies, managed to channel some of that at least and get people excited about them.
Yeah. There's a million theories. At the end of the day, the DC movies, sans one, if you count them since this new media break happened, just aren't great. Whatever. But I think people forget DC's churning out way more movies that are better. They just all happen to be animated.
True. DC has kicked Marvel's butt on animation for a long time.
And TV.
And TV shows. I haven't watched the TV shows, but I hear they're good. I plan to someday watch The Flash. But
yeah, I think you'd like that. I mean, there's all this stuff, and I think people forget, like, well, Marvel does this, and DC does this, and some stuff's better here, and some stuff's worse here, and just enjoy what you enjoy, and you don't have to follow company lines because you're not getting a paycheck. Like,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't realize people were fighting over which is better.
Yeah, which is weird because by all rights, for the longest time, I was a Marvel kid. Like, I had to make an active decision to kind of pick up DC, but I kept hearing about DC stuff and I wanted to kind of get into it. My entry point was Birds of Prey when Gail Simone was doing it, which is weird. And my second DC book that I ever picked up was Infinite Crisis, which, if you don't know DC lore, is unreadable.
Right. It must be bizarre to read it.
They had Uncle Sam pop in, and I was like, what? Like, are they trying to make an anagram of, like, the idea of mythology and heroes and whatnot? Like, I was trying to read into all this, and I found out, oh, no, that's a character they've had. Oh, okay. Like, I had this weird, lofty literary idea. Right. No. It's just
that must have been insane to dive into that as our early DC.
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, it's funny because I think trying to get into DC now would be a lot more parsable, because when I was trying to get in, the DC universe was at the height of its expansion. And part of the damage and silencer and all that is they're saying the DC universe is growing. And I'm like, well, yeah, from 50% Batman.
Yeah. Well, and when I started reading comics in the early 70s, DC seemed so bad to me as a kid compared to Marvel. I mean, it seemed ridiculous that DC was so bad. It just was incomprehensible how they could be so bad. They just had to read a Marvel comic to see why. But they spent like 15 years trying to figure out how to make comics a little more like Marvel.
Yeah.
But then DC became really good in the 80s, and then I loved DC. I don't understand the war between the two. Sometimes I've thought that Marvel is viewed as more heterosexual. That's what I used to think.
I don't know if I
was a little limp-wristed. That's ridiculous, but I had that impression at some point in my teen years. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know.
I have heard like people like Tony, Why Not Art, talking about how, where he grew up. I can't remember if he grew up in New York City or somewhere else in a mostly African-American neighborhood, that they only read Marvel there. And no one read DC, and that usually you couldn't find the DC comics at the stores.
I imagine if you're like in New York, like there's much more appeal for Marvel, because that's...
Well, there is that too.
Where it's at.
But even though most of the characters at Marvel were also white, maybe the DC comics just reflected a sort of 1950s straight white now I'm saying straight, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Square, kind of
yeah,
straight,
square jaw
kind of approach to life.
Yeah,
And Marvel comics were looser and a little bit closer. Their writers were taking drugs and putting
well,
it in
and
comics.
once you get past the initial Marvel age, there's at least one black character on the shelves at pretty much all times, right? Like you either have Black Panther or Luke Cage or
Black Goliath.
Blade. Yeah, or someone with black in their title that actually
Blade
is
never
black.
had his own title till after he had his own movie, I think. But
I started being a lot more hyper aware of characters that have like black in their name, like Black Adam, that aren't black.
right. Well, it was kind of absurd in the 70s. If you had a black character, you put black in the name, which was really, it's funny that at the time that did not connect to them what the problem was. They thought they were being pro-black, pro-African-American by doing those characters.
And according to Mark Waid, they're disproportionately given electricity powers.
Really? Who besides Black Lightning?
Static Shock, and after that I couldn't tell you, which is why I thought it was a weird thing, but he brought it up in Irredeemable.
Because Black Panther initially was just a great athlete and a super scientist.
Basically, still is a little more ginger on that kind of superhuman reflexes and whatnot.
Right.
But
isn't there some magic involved now that gives him extra powers? The spirit of the panther or something?
There's the spirit of the panther, but some of it comes from this root that you eat that's only given
really?
to the
So
mantle.
that makes it a little scientific.
Kind of Captain America-y in a way.
And then Luke Cage was just, I don't know, he was kind of like Ben Grimm or something, but without the rocky hide.
But written, I mean, if you read Luke Cage at different phases, he's a different guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Based even on kind of whatever.
Very politically incorrect, I really like the early blaxploitation version.
You're not alone.
It just has a lot of flair to it.
Oh yeah, I mean that was the whole charm of that whole thing, right? And then, but I mean, then you get him in the '90s with Azzarello writing him, and he's kind of like gangster rap Luke Cage, which doesn't read well.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake too.
And then you have him now, and he's just kind of a more thoughtful guy. And then now I'm sure the Netflix interpretation is going to play in and maybe be a more longer running one where he's more of kind of this, pretty intelligent but street smart guy, but knows his history and is, in and out.
So you probably have no interest in Valiant comics, but I take some interest in it.
I have some interest. It's just hard for me to... Valiant feels like you kind of have to be on board. Like, you can't just pick up a Valiant comic. Like, you need to be reading about... Because they only publish, 10 titles a month?
Yeah, or so maybe even less. I'm not sure. But I'm actually dipping in and out of Valiant myself. Usually books written by Matt Kindt, like Exo Man of War. It's kind of a maxi series right now, which I've really been enjoying. And I was reading Faith for a while, and I was reading Archer and Armstrong for a while. You have to pick your moments to jump on board. It is true. It's a little bit of an intimidating universe.
What's a maxi series?
Well, that's what they used to call a 12-issue miniseries. Like a miniseries would be up to 6 issues, and then there would be these 12-issue kind of series that are maxi series.
Okay.
So originally it sounded like Exo Man of War was either going to be 9 issues or 12, but now I think they've changed it. It may become open-ended.
Wait. So is 9 issues a mini or a maxi?
That's I think of anything over 6 as a maxi.
Now I have to think of something at 7 issues just to push it.
Well, I hope you can find a 7-issue.
Spider-Woman. There's a Spider-Woman run that was 7 issues.
But was it planned or announced as that?
Oh, no, it got axed because it didn't sell well by a certain point.
Usually the maxi series would say 1 of 12, 2 of 12, 3 of 12. Like Squadron Supreme. You've read that. I know Howler Mouse made you read it once upon a time. That was a classic 80s maxi series. And one reason they did that is they wanted to write graphic novels, but there were no graphic novels, or graphic novels were extremely few and far between. So this was the floppy version. They, instead of it being an open-ended story, they planned on a short-term story.
Makes sense.
So a lot of interesting, to my mind, comics like Squadron Supreme were written in the 80s because they had the comic book shop audience, but they didn't yet have a trade audience. And so they were working their way around the system to write sort of more one-off stories, or stories that actually had an ending.
Which I'm a fan of. Don't get me wrong, I love my ongoings, but I could use more endings.
Right. The trick is, in modern publishing, they often don't tell you if it really is a limited series or an open-ended series.
Which is insane to me.
It's pretty clear they've changed their mind on X-O Men of War for now.
Maybe I should try to catch up on Valiant. I wonder what that would take.
I think the nice thing about Valiant, it was run by people who really loved it and took it really seriously, whether you take it seriously or not. Maybe that was part of what made it hard to get into at times, because they took the Valiant universe so seriously.
Well, my entry point kind of
gone. They've been either bought out or kicked out. I'm not sure which.
Yeah. Well, my entry point was from when Valiant was Acclaim Comics, and Quantum and Woody was something I read all the old issues from like a year before they rebooted it. And so I got the first few issues of the new run, and it just had none of the charm that the old one did. And then they got Christopher Priest back to write Quantum and Woody, and I never touched it, so I don't know.
You're talking about the modern 2010s Quantum and Woody?
Yeah, they got Asmus, James Asmus, to write it, and it just didn't do anything for me. And then I know they got Christopher Priest back, and then they have someone else on it. Now that Christopher Priest is, I guess, exclusively at DC.
Well, some of the things that had the most charm of the original Valiant or Acclaim seem to have worked less well at Valiant, the current Valiant. Like, I thought originally the Archer and Armstrong, when it was written by Fred Van Lente, was just a poor shadow of the original one, kind of repeating the jokes, the same jokes, but less well.
Getting the sense you don't like Fred Van Lente.
You know, that's a good sense. I don't hate him. Generally, I find him neither good nor bad. But I particularly didn't like him on Archer and Armstrong because that was a favorite of mine of Valiant from back in the day.
Okay.
And I think it's particularly hard to repeat a comedy success.
That's very true.
And I don't know if Fred Van Lente is known for his comedy. He didn't do any comedy when he wrote Conan, but
is Conan ever like directly funny, not like tongue-in-cheek by situation funny?
No, there might be a funny moment here or there.
Yeah.
You know, usually at the expense of someone else, not at the expense of Conan.
I imagine the phases of Conan are probably like the phases of the Punisher for some reason. Like, you have these like super serious ones that like dig on like what it would mean or the realities of having a character that's this like destructive force. And then you have some that are just playing with and just being tongue-in-cheek about how kind of silly it is, but also digging in on like what it means at the same time. I don't know.
Well, and there's been lots of Conan parodies. The best one being Gru the Wanderer by Sergio Aragonés, which has gone on for hundreds of issues.
When you said best Conan parody, my mind did not go to Gru.
Where did it go?
Cerebus.
Oh yeah, Cerebus was a good-ish Conan. It was a good Conan parody when it started. I enjoyed it.
I mean, to be fair, it's only really a Conan parody for the first phone books worth, I guess.
Yeah, or maybe even less. It was the first 5 or 10 issues were direct parodies of specific Conan stories by Barry Windsor Smith.
Hold on. I'm gonna, because I mean, I see what you mean. I don't know, just even by the art, I don't know if this is even going to come through. Like, there's definitely some still,
right.
Berber.
Well, and he is supposed to be, I guess he's supposed to be a barbarian in the civilized worlds, which is the theme of Conan, is, barbarian versus civilization.
Though I guess that some of it's just straight parody, really, even by the later ones, as opposed to mostly riffing on Conan. Though by the middle, I mean, you have clearly not read Sonia. Oh, what's this chick's name?
Right.
It's been a while since I read this, obviously.
A long while since I've read it. So J-Rock says, read Divinity, Matt. And I agree with J-Rock's Divinity. It's really good. So that was a series of 4 miniseries from Valiant.
Valiant, okay.
Written by Matt Kint. To me, a lot of the best Valiant stuff is written by Matt Kint. And JLS Comics, Jesse says, it's good you get a true beginning, middle, and end versus a story cut off by cancellation. I assume he's talking about Divinity, and that's also true. And JLS says, a Conan comedy, that's an idea, LOL. Maybe like a Conan sitcom on TV. Which ends with him punching the fat civilized guy in the face at the end of every episode. Who would be me, I guess. J-Rock says, I like his Wolverine First Class. That must be part of some other earlier conversation that I'm not tracking.
Probably about Aaron.
And then Edward is responding to my comments about Marvel and DC, and he says 70s DC was boring compared to Marvel. Marvel was more hip, but only during that time. When you get to the mid-80s, it's not true. Marvel was more conservative compared to the Vertigo stuff. Right, and the pre-Vertigo stuff that was bubbling up, starting with Swamp Thing. So I agree completely with you, Edward. By the 80s, DC was kind of the hipper comic, and Marvel was still doing retreads of the Stan Lee era, but more and more, in a more and more dull way, probably. But still with lots of standouts. There's still lots of good 80s Marvel comics, but I think DC was stronger creatively then.
Well, I mean, DC, when you have the British invasion, I mean, that's a huge tipping point for comics as a whole. So,
and you have Marv Wolfman moving over to DC Comics and doing sort of Marvel-ish style comics better at DC than he used to do it at Marvel. But
I mean, we're talking about probably,
with the exception of Marv Wolfman's Dracula. I just bought this or received this in the mail a few days ago.
Show off your new toy.
I have the biggest books.
Oh man, where's my big book?
Women love me.
Oh, I have these Spider-Man nimbuses that someone got me that are pretty.
Those are good for crushing small animals or even large.
Hard to read. Like I'm sitting here and like it's weighing in my hand. And
yeah, I tried reading. I just got the Fourth World Omnibus.
Okay.
Which is like 16,000 pages, 1,600 pages. And I was reading it in my lap and my legs started to hurt. It's like cutting off the circulation or something. You have to read it resting on a table or something.
What's doubly hilarious to me is about the Spider-Man ones is they literally took this Masterworks collection they did in trades. And they literally just took whatever it was, blew it up, and just printed it in. So like you can see where the breaks were with the afterwards and stuff, and just go through. Which is fine. I just find it funny that's
well, it is kind of cheap of them. I noticed they put those same afterwords in, even though the afterword or the forewords, the introductions will be talking about 6 issues, but you really have 25 issues in your hand or something.
Yeah. I'm happy to get all the notes. I just the way they did it is kind of funny to me.
J-Rock says, why have I not read Cerebus? Well, Cerebus is awfully intimidating now because it's 300 issues, and us modern readers feel like we have to read them all.
I actually, last year, I haven't gone through it. I was really tempted to because Running with Comics was going through them. But he just started, and I couldn't keep pace at all because churning through one of those is just.
Did he get all the way through? I mean, everyone says the last 100 issues are not readable.
Well, part of it, I want to read those.
I haven't tried them. I dropped them.
But I got all these collected because they're reprinting them now in a different format, and my OCD kicked in. I'm like, I have to have them all in the same format, so I'm getting them now. I did that with a couple of comics actually, and it's sitting there at my shelf staring at me.
Nice. Is there something special about it?
I owned like 90%. I needed to get 3 more, but one of them was impossible to track down. So that was one of my last. I feel like I always say this. There's usually something that pops up, but I feel like I'm mostly done with my comic hunting. If I can't just kind of get something, I don't bother as much anymore. I just want to read the damn thing. But I always find some weird nook or cranny that I have to hunt down some weird comics. Some old Steve Ditko or something drags me back in. But ever since I got that last Ninja Turtles comic, my idea of hunting for comics has really taken a plunge.
So you've got all the Ninja Turtles you wanted, and now...
No, but the ones that I want are literally impossible to get, or at such a price that even if I could find them, I wouldn't want them at that price.
Right.
Which are all volume 4, which was all Peter Laird, basically. Kevin Eastman didn't have any input, and Laird had Talbot, who's like the Turtles artist when you break it down. Maybe not so much anymore that IDW is the longest run, but for that era. And they did this really like melodramatic low action run. And I have about the first half of it. And the second half was less and less copies to the last handful of issues. Literally, there's only like a few thousand printed. And you had to order them off the Ninja Turtles website through PayPal by issue as they came out to get them. And at the time, I was like, I didn't have a card. I had no way to do this. So I remember seeing it and being like, I want to, but you also have to pay $10 an issue. And that was steep for me. And I mean, it still would be. But now if you want to get one of those issues, they ain't $10. They're like usually at least 100. And I didn't really like it that much. I just want to own it because I want to own
all
full Turtles runs. And I'm okay not owning like a first print Turtles 1, and I don't even have a single issue Turtles 2 through 9. I don't think. But I don't care because I have 2 reprints of it.
J-Rock, is that the Image TMNT?
No, I own all of the Image Turtles TMNT, and there are 2 follow-up comics that were made but never published that were released online. I have those digital files correlated. I love the Image run. I have all of that, and I bought it before that was a collector's item, so I got lucky there.
And Edward says, Matt still hasn't done his Deadman review. I notice he's taken it from his shelf.
Oh my gosh, it's sitting right here. Yeah, no, I've been
read it.
It scares me. I'm afraid to open this. Here, maybe I should just pop the plastic. That'll help me get past it right now, right here.
I wonder, does it form a coherent whole at all? I don't know. I only read a few bits of it, pieces here and there over the years.
This is like all the Deadman of up to a point. Okay, see, it's like in this. It doesn't want to come out. It's a whole thing. Okay, here we go. It's out of the plastic. That'll help.
Is it one of those recolored Adams reprints? I hate the way they recolor them.
I'm curious. So the thing about this one, oh, good, it's in English.
Because you bought it in Japan, right?
Yeah,
I got that.
Well, so this was a story. So we're in a bizarre shop that has. It's like this 2-story huge shop, which in Japan is even weirder, and they have all this manga and all this media. Or no, it's not 2 stories. It's like 5 stories. So like the first one's your main manga, and they have a little comic section tucked away in the side, which had a ton of Spawn, which blew me away. And a lot of new 52 stuff they had reprinted in Japanese that you could get, and a handful of other things. I have a few oddities off to the corner here.
So the Spawn was in Japanese?
Some yes, some no.
Okay.
But there's a lot of it in comparison to anything else. But I was looking for comics I could pick up because I wanted to get some comics in Japan, but I also felt like, I don't know, do I need to buy this in Japan? Because what do I care? I mean, I want to read it, and it was there. And then we wanted to find out how much it cost because they didn't do that. So they took it behind the counter, and I also wanted to know if it was in English. And they opened it up, and they're like, "Oh, okay, so it's $500." And I was like, "Okay." And you buy now, yes? I don't have enough language to negotiate my way out of that. $500 sounds bad. That's like $50, so probably about what you'd expect. But
about list price, probably.
Yeah, I mean, plus keep in mind it's been imported.
And then you imported it back to its mother country.
Right. And I wonder if this was literally just an import and I just brought it back. It looks like it. Like, this doesn't look like it has any... Okay, so what does this have? This will tell me what's in here. So there's the Arnold Drake, Conan, Neal Adams. There's ink on the name, so I can't read it.
Weird.
Infantino? Is that right?
Infantino? Carmine Infantino?
Yeah. Which goes to the second, which is just Jack Miller and Neal Adams. Okay, so there's this 6.
Arnold Drake was one of the more interesting DC writers. I think he's the inventor of the Doom Patrol also.
Huh.
If I have my memory right.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the little... Because there's not a good... Here we go. Strange Adventures, 205, 206, 207, 208, 209, 210, 211, 212. And then Brave and the Bold, Strange Adventures, Aquaman 50. All right. And for a while. Okay, so this is a culmination of the Neal Adams Deadman.
So every time Neal Adams drew Deadman or Deadman appeared in a story,
that's what it's looking
drawn by Neal Adams? I didn't know Neal Adams ever drew Aquaman.
Maybe he didn't, but maybe it's just part of this era. I'm learning as I go. Neal Adams script, Neal Adams artist on Aquaman. So he drew it. Or maybe it was ghost drawn or ghost written by someone. His name was on it.
Well, maybe they're definitely artists who can mimic other artists' style, and there were a lot of artists who could mimic Neal Adams up to a point. Maybe he has had ghosts.
Look at this. That is as many words as you get in a comic anymore.
Right.
Like, man, which is I'm fascinated.
Which is sometimes good and sometimes bad.
Yeah, no, this looks like a gem. I think half the reason I was afraid to open it was because I was afraid it was going to be in Japanese. I was going to be horribly disappointed.
So, Edward, it sounds like any review of Deadman is yet to come because he hasn't read it yet.
Yeah, it's only been, what, a year?
Well, don't you find that if you're getting floppies, the trades get pushed back and then pushed back and pushed back?
I've been reading schizophrenically. So I've been reading a lot of Spider-Man and X-Men lately. And a lot of the trade reading I've been meaning to, like I have a pile of Hellblazer and Spawn and Cerebus and stuff like this that have been pushed aside, but I've been pushing through stuff I've been reading to read for a long time, so I'm actually crawling through stuff.
And you cut your floppies way back. It sounds like you're getting a little more than you did for a while. Like maybe you're coming back to floppies a little?
Well, this last week, I just saw a couple things on the shelf, and I just broke down because I was just too intrigued. Right. That Milk Wars thing you just brought up was one of them.
And I wanted to ask you about that. So, well, Before I do that, though, maybe part of the reason, like, I'm motivated to get more floppies because I get a 25% discount.
Yeah, that would help.
And since you don't, you're going to be pickier about what floppies you pick up.
So I have to remind myself of this because you live in the comic mecca, and I talk to you a lot. So I have this perception of what other shops do, but out here, I have my shop, and if I want to shop somewhere else, it becomes a different thing. I wouldn't be able to just go get my comics every week after work. I'd have to drive. Well, that other comic shop moved, so I'd have to be driving over an hour,
right,
just to go to another comic shop that I like them. They're decent.
That would be worth it unless you're getting a huge discount and picking up 20 comics or something.
And they do a better discount, somewhat, but not like dramatically.
Right. Well, 25% is the very best discount I've found in this comic book mecca. A lot of places are 10 or 15%.
I get 10% on the ones in my file, and nothing else.
Yeah, the 25% has really motivated me, I have to say, and I get 25% off of anything in the shop, with maybe the exception of the wall comics, but I'm not interested in $100 comics for the most part.
If I even got 10% on any comic I picked up off the wall, that wasn't like, I understand for some of them, they're like, we ordered 3 copies, man, I can't, dice it. But like, if I pick up a Justice League for whatever reason, cut me my 10%, I'm much more likely to pick it up.
I get 25% off of the back issues, and I get 25% off the trades.
Oh my god! Yeah, I'd be
the trades. I can get 45% off online, but
well,
I still pick up some trades at the shop because I'm there, and I feel they're really friendly too, and it's 25% off. But I've been buying more and more every week now. If I have time, the days I have time. Thought I had an example of it. I just thought they have a box of their most recently priced back issues, and I thumb through it every week, and I end up picking up something.
Man, I'd do that more if I had the incentive, but I don't. But I picked up this Milkman thing anyways, or Milk Wars.
Yeah, so you mentioned it very quickly in your last video, I think.
I don't know, like, it's fascinating, and I don't know what to like. That's a comic I'd have to sit with before.
And you haven't been reading Doom Patrol. It's a little more comprehensible if you have the.
Oh, I bet.
But it's not a lot more. I mean, it's still a hard read.
Oh, any hook to help climb that wall. It's fascinating. I was blown away. I loved it, but I had nothing to like. I literally just read it. I turned on the camera and I'm like, usually I'm able to just go, and didn't happen.
Well, and the art is really nice, and the coloring is really nice.
But there's a splash page with substance. Like, there's something to look at there, and there's something to take in.
And it's creative. It's not like every other splash page, which is a giant picture of Batman punching somebody.
Or a static, dramatic moment.
Well, then I think you should dig up the Gerard Way Doom Patrol.
At this point, aren't trades like already available? Like, wouldn't it just make more sense?
I think you could get it in trades.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think they've had 10 issues out, so you probably get the first trade, and this next trade will be out.
The whole reason I wasn't getting that Doom Patrol for a while is like, it was interesting to me, but part of it is on my trade wall. I have the entire old Doom Patrol run that I'm being to read
all first. That's the advantage when I buy them in floppies. It's a new series. I'll read it. I did in the back of my head think I should go back and read Doom Patrol, but I just went ahead and read this.
Yeah,
once I'm sure it's extremely referential to the past, but it's still it's just packed with wacky imaginative stuff that doesn't quite make sense, but it's still fun because they pack so much in.
It hits me as like a Grant Morrison comic with some of the fun, crazy stuff, but less of the just pure insanity of justification. Like, it's willing to go there, and it's resting its laurels on being metatextual and going for it.
Yeah, it's a bit like this whole thing. most of the people in here are recognizing they're fictional, right? And it's going to that well too much because of already having done that it goes to the well of characters being fictional, and it goes to the well of some kind of gross magical food that's being forced on the populace so that these themes kind of repeat. But I think it's even better written, the regular Doom Patrol, than this is. This is probably slightly weakened by the co-writer Steve Orlando, who gets first listing actually, but it's still mostly feels like Gerard Way's Doom Patrol.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so fascinated by this milk thing going on throughout and the way people are like reacting to it. And then you have Superman as the milkman, like, is just perfect. I don't know.
Right.
It just...
Yeah, I always, with Doom Patrol and with this issue, I find I have to kind of let go of something in myself to enjoy it. But once I let go of it, I can enjoy it.
Well, and it's a Doom Patrol JLA crossover, but it's really clearly just the JLA coming into this Doom Patrol metatextual, which is recontextualizing all these characters.
Right. It's some version of the JLA appearing as characters in here, but
which is perfect to me. Like, play them as anagrams straight up, because those characters are, and then just have a story with it. It doesn't need to be some big Justice League event or whatever. It's playing with these characters.
I love this page where the milkman is looking at Superman's origin from the original Superman comic.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's fun. I worry about recommending it to people, but it's really fun.
I mean, someone not watching something like this, sure. I mean, but in general, the amount, like, it'd be like trying to recommend, because I've heard this a lot, and I always fight against it when people recommend it. What can I think right now? The comic archaeologists one.
Planetary?
Yeah, Planetary. Planetary is an amazing, great comic. But if you don't have any background with kind of what they're playing with,
right,
it just doesn't, like, it's still a decent comic, but it doesn't resonate. It doesn't.
It amazes
the magic's lost
so well because it's full of cultural references outside of comic books.
That's true too, though. Yeah,
like that famous Japanese writer who committed harikari after having a conservative revolution, and things like that those are real things from other cultural events. But
is there an annotated Planetary? That feels like a book that deserves the treatment.
It really should be. Yeah, I don't think I think to annotate something, it really has to sell well. Like, they only just came out with the annotated Watchmen, which I have just ordered.
Oh, I am so tempted. I've had this thing, actually, since I got annotated Sandman. I started looking into it. There's a small group of people that look at annotating things, and comics in particular. And there's some, they're not published alongside annotations, which are fine by me. I'd be fine if they did annotations that were a little book you picked up in it.
Right. I think there's one like that for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yeah, like, that'd be perfect.
Get a hold of that, actually. Just a book that explains all the references in those stories.
Right. And I know there's a few comics that the annotations are put together, but they're not published. They just exist online, and you can look them up. Yeah, I mean, if you're ever looking for a project, that might be something.
Yeah. I can retire and just do online annotations of comic books.
So next time I read Sandman, I don't know how I'm going to do it, because what I have to do is pull out the omnibus.
Absolute? Don't you have the absolutes?
Yeah, the absolute, and then I'm going to have the annotated above that, and like flip through them page by page.
I think you have to buy a special table just to read these.
Oh my God.
It should be one of those slightly slanted art tables with a big
right
to hold it. It bothers me a bit that they always do these annotated versions in black and white. I'd rather just pay a little more and have a color version. But anyway,
I kind of wonder how much a little more that would be, because those aren't cheap to begin with. So it seems silly that, though, I mean, it's unstandard pages, so I'm wondering if that's part of it. But it feels bizarre that, yeah, it's not in color. especially for a book like Watchmen, where like
Right.
colors factor. Same with Sandman.
Sandman too. I'm not even sure what the Sandman. I actually I'm kind of curious. I'd like to look at your editions just to see what the black and white Sandman artwork looks like.
Even more bizarrely, like the Absolute Sandmans were recolored, and that was the only way to get the recolored Sandman for a long time, which, let me tell you, made a difference for a lot of those.
Are they well recolored, you're saying?
Yes, they're the kind of recoloring that I
Good
support.
recoloring, unlike some. There's definitely a lot of good recoloring, and then there's some bad recoloring.
The whole idea of recoloring or coloring a comic that was initially black and white is a fascinating thing, and I love digging into that for some reason. I have 2 different colorings of original Ninja Turtle comics. I have the colored version of Akira. I have recoloring. The only one of the main recolorings that's actually kept me from reading a comic, because I know I don't like it, based on comparisons I've seen, is Mr. Miracle.
Mr. Miracle's been recolored?
Or not Mr. Miracle. What am I saying?
Man.
Miracle Man.
Right. Okay.
How did I confuse that?
So is the Marvel version recolored?
It is. It's all these dark grays, and it's trying to go for the more.
I hate the dark grays.
Well, because it was originally done, the kind of more 4-color style, bright, vibrant colors.
So that has 3 versions, because it was originally done black and white in Warrior magazine, and then brought to the United States and done. I didn't even know that. So I have the first 10 issues of Warrior magazine with black and white versions of it all. Same with Vias for Vendetta.
V for Vendetta, I want the black and white, because the color, that is one of the few comics that I'll just say straight up, I hate the way they did the coloring, the weird impressionist.
I don't even recall the coloring. I think I just read a library version because I had already, bought half of it in black and white.
You could find a copy for nothing. I'm sure that's one of the most.
Yeah, or maybe I used to own a color trade of it. Actually, I just can't remember what the color was like. It really was cut beautiful black and white artwork.
It just made me realize, I was wondering if something I got was, no, it's black and white. Okay.
J-Rock says the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles hardcovers look great in color. Do you agree with that?
So I'm going to assume he has the IDW publishing of the recolors, which was the ones I have are the works. They also did them in issues.
Well, because they came out, the original ones came out black and white first, right?
Right. And there's the initial coloring was done by First Publishing, which actually did a better job, more in the line of what Steve Oliff did when he kind of invented this digital color separation. And it's such a better, I have a video somewhere. I might have to just do it again, essentially. But if you look at the way the colors are shown and how it represents what's on the page and whatnot, the earlier 80s recoloring is stronger than the one done in the 2000s, because the one in the 2000s tries to have this pixelated Andy Warhol kind of blown up dot matrix flavor.
The glossy look on things and the
no, they tried to do this dot matrix kind of overprints. There's kind of these weird black dots kind of thrown in with
trying
the coloring.
A fake retro look in a way or something.
Yeah, to try to make it look more like retro, but it's not even 80s. It doesn't make any sense. But as I go on, and I have no comparison because other Ninja Turtles comics, that's the only coloring that exists. When I read City at War again, the color adds so much, and it is so good. And it kind of made me realize that First Publishing coloring is amazing. And this other coloring is good. And I think they kind of toned down their weird extra flavor a bit. But yeah, the City at War recoloring makes that a classic in my mind. I think if you read any Ninja Turtles, you could probably skip 2 and 3, but the first and then 4th and 5th of the works with their coloring is a chunk of all the best comics I've ever
Jay
read.
Rocks is agreeing with you here. He says the work's recoloring is really good.
Yeah.
He also makes me jealous because he's saying he bought V for Vendetta for $3 in color.
Oh yeah, no, because those trades were passed around and they were in college classes and probably still are. Like those are distributed books that you can get for a song if you just know when and where to look. Which for you, what right after school's out of session, I imagine there has to be kind of a flux. So, because yeah, I got my copy for like $5 or something. Like it wasn't. I think at the college bookstore.
I wonder what happened to my copy.
I never bought any Nexus at the college. So Mike Barron went to my college, and so they tried to hype him up there. And I didn't know who he was. I never heard of Nexus. Then at the store, they're like, well, the guy who made Nexus went here. And I was like, who cares? And after I get out of college, I hear all this stuff about Nexus. I was like, oh well.
Yeah, someone once told me, reading Nexus is kind of dicey because of Mike Barron's conservative politics. But if he's a conservative, I never noticed it from the comic book. I don't see any.
Yeah, I mean, he's also a dick. Is the bigger problem. Having had to, I had to work with him at the
Maybe
convention.
That's why he hasn't worked in comics so much since the 80s.
Oh my God, he's not a bad guy, but when you're trying to deal with him when he has needs, it's frustrating.
What kind of needs are we talking about here? More
demands for like bottled
stuff
water at a certain point, or just I can't do this, I need this and such. It's just there's a handful of artists, and maybe I shouldn't be talking because it's a lot of them and there's different opinions. Also,
I don't want to get to know people. Right? I mean, I don't want to get to know people whose books I enjoy reading. The risk is too high.
Well, so on the flip side, though, there's a couple of creators that I had bad experiences with, and then I saw them again, and they were great. Sometimes it's just that you catch them on the wrong day. Fred Van Lente was one of those for me.
I never said he was a bad guy or anything.
Oh, no. I'm just...
In fact, I've enjoyed interviews I've heard with him.
He's a great guy. I just caught him on the wrong day, the wrong way once, and he was just kind of short with me, and I realized that was just a bad moment, whatever.
Right. Which is... Max Washington's pointing out, people also say John Byrne is a dick, too, but I don't... So I'm just glad I've never met John Byrne. I just want to enjoy his comics. Even if they're great people, I don't know if I really need to meet them to... I'd rather just enjoy their comics.
The last creator I was dying to meet is coming to Denver this year, so I'll be able to move on, at least for a while, till I think of someone else.
I do kind of like meeting people who aren't known now, and if I like them, then I'm going to enjoy it as they become successful.
Meeting them is weird because usually if they're big enough, you're in a line and you get 3 seconds to say hi and get a book signed, and that's it.
I'd rather meet somebody as a fellow enthusiast of comics than meet them as I'm saying you're great. I don't like that fan relationship.
I've had a few good conversations with creators. Joe Kelly comes to mind, and so does John Lyman. Although it was a little awkward. So speaking of creators that you caught on a bad day, for Comic Fest, when I was involved with them, we flew out him and Rob Guillory. I might be saying his name wrong now.
I think it's Guillory, but I don't know.
Yeah, the creators of Chew.
Right.
We flew them out together. They were kind of the headliners for this small little dinky thing that was a
Boulder Comic Fest.
No, it was in Denver, but it was part of the Sci-Fi Con, and this was like in a side hotel, so it was a sub-con, and they thought they were coming to a Comic-Con, and they're in this like hallway with like a handful of other locals and a few other creators and nothing else.
So they're literally in an alley for the comics or something.
Yeah, I didn't know that they had gotten sold a bad line, and now that I know who did it, I understand what happened. But yeah, when they showed up, they were none too happy. And so when I was trying to talk to them, they were kind of not feeling it. Then later at Denver Comic Con, which is a Comic Con, I was talking to him, and he was lit up. And he was talking to us about like, yeah, we were in Denver once, and there was this sideshow that we got dragged to, and da da da. And me and the person who was with, who was part of the festival too, was like, "Oh, really? That sounds terrible." So it's an awkward exchange, but hearing it from his perspective, I totally get it. So.
One of our favorite people, 64-page special, has joined us. He said, "Bottled water. Phew, I was expecting a hashtag Me Too story."
Oh, it's coming.
Probably hoping you'll take your shirt off, but none of that on my channel. And J Rock says Nexus is so underrated, and I totally agree with you, Jay. Yeah. And he says, "Yep, different experience meeting someone before they're famous."
That's true too.
Yeah, it seems like, someone who's famous or, comic book famous could, when you meet them, it can be random. They might be in the mood just to have a regular conversation. They could be a great guy, or they could be in the middle of feeling hassled and having too many demands put upon them or something like that, or jet lagged or whatever.
On the other, the one person I knew really before they had any fame at all, like, we're friends. So right. When I see her and we talk, like, I can't get a sense of how she talked to most people because it's, "Hey Matt, how's it going?"
Right. So if you know them beforehand, then that's the ideal. If you like them and then you're glad they're successful versus you like their work and then you want to be their friend or have a conversation with them, it's just a different relationship.
Which if you had stuck with me at Portland, you would have seen, but.
Wait, did I not stick with you at some point?
Oh, we wandered back and forth for a while. So.
For those who don't know, that last year, Matt stayed at my house, and we went to the local con, the Rose City Comic Con together, where his old friend, whose name I always say wrong, Layla DeLuca lives in Portland now, as do many comic book artists. So she was there at the con. I'd forgotten that you got to hook up with her, connect with her. I thought.
Sorry, I was trying to tell the story without name dropping.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, whatever. People call me whenever I do that. Like, how do you tell the story without saying the name? No, but I mean, so I don't want to make a big thing, like, because it's not really. I mean, just when I was starting to try to self-publish and get involved in the comic scene in Colorado, she was doing that and already kind of there, and we were selling comics literally across the hall from each other, and we'd start talking and we got to know each other and just mutual friends and stuff like that. And so we'd see each other at parties and talk and whatever, and like, she's good people. We started trying to talk comics more, and our tastes are completely different.
You remember what her tastes were like before she made it?
I mean, there's pretty much the same now. She just kind of gets into whatever it is. I mean, she doesn't have anything against anything big or small. It's just she's not big on superheroes, which is fine. I tried to have her read Scud because I thought kind of the esoteric stuff would be up her alley, and not like that. But I mean, she pushed me to read some like Love and Rockets and I don't know, more of the classic cartooning kind of stuff. Also pushed me to read some of the local stuff, some Noah Van Sciver and whatnot, who, I was meeting and talking to at that point as well. And just like, for a while, Denver had this comic scene, and there still is a scene, but so many people have gotten pushed out because the rent's too high here. And so now it's a shadow of what it was. And it's kind of sad because we used to have a cool local scene. But you, Mr. Portland, there's too many people there to even like, it can't be the same thing.
Someday the high rents here have got to push people out. I mean, this is becoming like San Francisco here slowly. It's not as bad as San Francisco yet, but it's starting to resemble that. And that's got to push the younger crowds I mean, maybe someone like Layla can make enough money that she can continue to stay in Portland, but I would think a younger version of herself at this point might not want to move to Portland.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, so like even she did that to be closer to where she's being published and work with those people, and it made sense. Also get out of Denver. But like does anyone who does those crazy zines and stuff that you're showing me, like does anybody make like a living, like modest living, I'm sure, but like can people get by doing independent efforts there?
They must have jobs, the zine type of people, and their
Yeah.
hope is to be picked up by something like Fantagraphics later on.
But what about the guy who did like Capra? Like,
well, he lives in New York City, so I have
well
no
then I don't know why
the guy
that's cheap there.
Self-publishes it 500 copies. I don't know. He must have some other support system, I would assume, but I don't know the story. He may now make money with reprinting the trades and stuff. Max Washington asks who. I missed the name. You didn't really want to mention the name, and I mentioned it anyway, but it's the artist of Shudder, let's put it that way, which was a good Image comic.
And now Sleepless, which I should try to plug.
Except you don't like the writing in it.
Not yet. I don't know. I can't even. So I don't even want to say like, because I know I talked about it in my last video, but like I said there, like I didn't even really read it. I was starting to skim through it. And maybe it's more interesting than what it was,
right,
late at night. There's no real action there.
Did you do a fill-in issue of Wicked and Divine?
Oh yeah, I think so.
Max is mentioning that. So either he's got.
Yeah.
I need to try Wicked and Divine, I guess, again. I mean, I read the first few issues and I just didn't understand it at all. But I feel somehow when I hear people talk about it that I've missed something.
Try a trade. My girlfriend.
No, I'm not going to buy individual issues. I thought I might, when they finish it, I might try reading it from the library or something.
Just, read trades. That's a book that if it's not grabbing you, you have to at least try a trade if you're going to go back in.
The art looked really nice. So, and when he said that DeLuca did a fill-in issue, that intrigued me actually, because I like her art also.
She's great when she's given room to do something.
Right. I am convinced Sarah Vaughn is just, for me, not a writer I like. I think Alex and Ada was a fluke, and everything else she's written, I think I just don't like it.
What I find bizarre is Layla did she wrote something, a Far, if memory is, I haven't gotten my hands on it yet, but like she used to write and draw all her own stuff, because that's kind of how you do it in that scene, unless you're trying to be me, which doesn't work.
Right.
And just write, which it doesn't work.
Think you'd like to get back to writing? Maybe I should have you speak for her. But
oh, I thought you were asking me. She wants to do both. She had this solo book that came out, and someone else drew it, and I thought, what an odd thing, because
I think I saw that, but I didn't pick it up.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean, she's written a lot of interesting stuff, and I one time grilled her because I went through what was at the time her library of a handful of original works, and I was like, I really like this, I really like this. This one I don't like because of the ending, and I kind of grilled her on it for all because I wanted to get at why she decided on something, and maybe it was too much. Yeah, no, she's done a lot of cool independent stuff, and I'm kind of surprised some of that isn't more collected. But one of the coolest things about Shudder was the last page or the back cover. They'd get smaller creators to have a few pages to do whatever with. And I know that some of that talent was pulled from, the scene here or other people she knew. And it was just cool to see that love for comics and the burst of creativity come through. And they pushed that with Shudder. And
yeah. It's weird how a lot of artists, when they write, they aren't the artist. I'm not sure what that's about, but I've noticed that. Well, like Chip Zdarsky, he's writing all these comics that he doesn't draw, and then he's drawing a comic that he doesn't write.
I get that a little more because he's writing like, you know what, Spider-Man and
Well, he also did
Jughead.
an Image comic that was a science fiction one, and I bought the trade, and I only got through like 2 issues worth before I gave up. But
Yeah. Then there's also the writers who do the art too, but the second they don't have to do the art for themselves, they never come back to it, like Bendis or Hickman.
or Seeley, Tim Seeley's an artist,
Oh, okay.
and Rick Remender was an artist early on.
Was he? What did he do?
Yeah.
What did Seeley do?
He did some comics where he was the artist at Marvel and elsewhere. I can't remember where, but I've seen his art. So, well, this a wide variety of comments here. J Rock says Portland looks like it's a lot of fun at Christmas time, which is funny because I took these videos I meant to insert, took these Christmas videos of Portland that I meant to insert in my videos and never did. But so I'm not sure what he means by that. Max Washington says, "Oh, sorry, it was mainly McKelvey. Layla did a cover. I love anything by Gillen." J Rock says, "What type of stories are you into writing, Matt?"
Okay.
This may be your greatest secret. You've revealed all on YouTube, but not your writing that I know.
Oh, I mean, I'd like to write more. I've written a handful of things that never came to fruition. Let's see. So I did some anthology work that was me just trying to work with the artist to get something out so that we could sell something at our table. Those are mostly gags, and I wouldn't stand by most of them. But the one main thing I got, Kinko published, right, was something called Mitch the Middle Class Merc, which was the guy loses his day job, and he ends up finding in the newspaper that someone wants to get a hit taken on someone, and he doesn't know any other way to make money at this point. So he goes and he's hired to kill the guy who fired him because of some weird mafia connection thing that I concocted. And then when he's going to kill the boss is so distraught by his connections with the mafia and whatnot that he's actually going to commit suicide to try to get out of it. But in order for the contract to go through, he has to kill him. He can't just let him die. So goes from there. I wrote a second issue of that, which involves some burrito lady war around. It was playing with like corporate lifestyle stuff in the most like zany, hyper violent.
So if we had to peg you, we could say you're a writer of zany, hyper violent comics.
Yeah, all the stuff I've written pretty much is in that area. I also wrote a superhero parody, unsurprisingly, that I called Newt Man, that I got 3 issues of writing through and never.
Was there violence in those? Or
less
violence? Less.
Because like Mitch was written more around the time when I was getting into Deadpool and Scud and all that. So, cool dudes with guns, killing people, whatever. Also, Mitch just made sense to be violent the way I was going with it. Whereas Newt Man was like superhero parody. So I'm doing like Justice League, Avengers. You can only, violence only goes so far when people are punching each other.
Well, somewhere I've seen things where the fist goes right through the skull. You could do that and comes out the other side, and pieces go smattering all over. Laser Duchamp has joined us. Boy, I'm trying to remember. I know Laser Duchamp. I used to see you a lot in the past, but that was a long time ago. He or she says, because I can't remember if I know you from YouTube or just from comments. Time slip SOS. I'm receiving this live on Saturday morning, yet you exist now on Friday night timeline. Time for a coffee.
There you go. You gotta...
Early morning in Europe now. Edward says, in Nexus Comics, Barron's, in quotes, conservatism isn't anything that would bother you. Seriously, it's 80s conservatism. So people wouldn't even notice it. Well, I wouldn't. I read a lot of Nexus. Maybe if I went back and reread it, looking for the signs of conservatism, but I just thought they were good comics, and I guess there was kind of political spoofs in them, clearly by someone who doesn't like politicians, which is most of us.
Yeah, I really should find a way to get it. Since I left, I haven't seen a Nexus comic nearly anywhere. Like, I don't know.
Oh, really? I see them in dollar boxes a lot.
I'd probably want to buy the collections just to not have
There
to.
are omnibuses from Dark Horse.
Yeah.
They're slightly smaller than the original comic book size, which is a bit annoying.
I've seen them on his table. I think that's where I've seen them.
So we've talked at times about doing a podcast. I can't quite picture how it's going to work.
I mean, the problem would be you'd have to get free on a regular basis.
So let's say I've told my wife and daughter that every Thursday night I'm going to record the podcast with Matt.
Can't do Thursday.
What?
I said I can't do Thursday, but
okay. Well, that was just hypothetical.
I know.
But I feel somehow if we did a podcast, we'd have to be more organized or something. I don't know why.
We need something to go for. We can't just randomly go. What we need to do is look at Longbox reviews and, ask for wisdom from the master. Because he has a viewer or a listenership of what, hundreds, thousands.
When he and I discussed it, we realized I have a bigger viewership than he had listenership.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, let's just follow your instincts.
It may have grown. It may have grown since then. And mine has shrunk. I've noticed this past year my viewership has shrunk.
Damn.
Still plenty of viewers, but it has shrunk, and I think that's because I'm old. I'm an old YouTuber now, and since I'm not doing anything new to catch attention.
Well, you know what to do is just throw SJW in the title of your videos.
Yeah.
And
I'm going to change the title of this to Roasting SJW from Colorado.
Oh, yeah. I see. There you go.
But let's see. So, I mean, what would your ideal podcast be like?
Clearly, just every time we're talking about the current state of Deadpool and the Ninja Turtles.
I thought you wanted to do it about back issue, old comics, or do you want to?
Yeah, I mean,
the wrap up of your reading and.
I feel like trying to do the weekly poll thing is just how many people are talking, and we talk about that separately. I'd want to have some hook. I feel like, okay, I'm looking at these little notes you put that we had for ideas if we.
Right, I was trying to be more like a podcast and put up show notes for you.
I felt like, so if we stuck with something like, how do you have this written? The origins of decompression, like talking about decompression in comics, and just that's the conversation for an hour, and then pick a topic.
I feel like on YouTube I can bullshit about it, but if I was on a podcast, I'd like to have to actually research it or something. I don't know why.
Right?
Separate the two.
What is about that YouTube that just feels so illegitimate that I can just come on here and say it?
Well, and clearly people take like the professionals take podcasts more seriously than YouTube. Even though, YouTube may have a bigger audience, as in the case of Longbox Review, at least a year ago.
Yeah. I wonder how Longbox is doing now, because he teamed up with Peter Rios, who's like a name for that scene.
Well, in podcasting in general, you might build up an audience more easily than on YouTube, where there's so much on YouTube. Like for people interested in comic book community videos, there's now 500 more choices than there were 2 years ago.
And you can't dig through them the way you could a few years ago because the algorithms are such that, certain people are going to come up and you're never going to see other people. People who I found through suggestions by looking at my own videos or watching your video or something, those people don't come up anymore. It's Stephen Colbert or, like some like big network things.
I get a lot of people. And like if I click on someone that I haven't watched before, then I see a bunch of people on the side that maybe they follow that I don't.
Yeah.
So, but another way, like if you really wanted to find people, another way to do it is just click on people in comments to find new people. But the thing is, there's so many people to watch that excuse me, I think I don't know, there's a lot of comic book podcasts too, but I'm thinking maybe I might be wrong. The cream rises up more. I like some comic book podcasts where there's an element of rambling, but our out of control YouTube rambling might not work in just an audio setting.
I think setting the times is the key to that balance. Just like this is an hour, and at an hour we give ourselves 5 minutes to wrap up. Like.
And once you have gotten used to wrapping up, then you've maybe both realize you're getting to the wrapping up point.
Because if we did our when we were talking about like Ditko and Spider-Man, some of the creator stuff around that, if you just kind of. That'd probably work, but when we started just going, because we're at, see here,
because potentially we also could just do hangouts on YouTube and then download them into some podcasting system.
But we know it's going to be
this mess.
Rambly. Yeah. Is anybody still watching this?
We have half the viewers we had originally. We have 8 viewers now. J Rocks is still leaving some comments. He says Nexus Omnis are pretty cheap. Then he says just random topics or reviews live on the wild, unorganized side. And then he also says back issue chats.
Yeah, see, I'd be so much more interested to pick a chunk of comics to talk about or have a topic or something, dig into something, because just talking books.
The trick about digging into things, I find from our experiences, is you should sort of be selective. Like if we read 3 Mysterio comics, then we feel like we have to talk about everything in those comics, but it might actually be better to pick certain aspects to talk about.
Yeah, that's true.
What I'm saying is across the board, digging into things isn't always a good listen, I think, also.
I disagree. Those Mysterio videos are just top-notch.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying ours are particularly bad or anything, but I'm just saying in general, if I'm listening to people, because I do listen to some people at work who go blow by blow through, they pick one comic and they go blow by blow through the entire comic. And I realize I don't want to hear, if I've read the comic, I don't need to relive every moment of the comic. And if I haven't read it, going blow by blow through it is either very boring or totally spoils the comic for me.
Yeah. That's been my
worrying about spoiling a 1961 Ditko comic is not a big deal, but
it's not even the spoilers though. Just having someone read a comic to you is just no good.
Right. Well, they aren't even reading it though. They're saying, "Oh, and then this happens, and all of this happens, and I really thought that the fingernails looked wrong, or whatever." It might be interesting if the fingernails look wrong, but
yeah. I think taking notes, talking about different aspects is good, but yeah, trying to run through it is not the way.
Jay says doing 4 topics, 30 minutes a topic, and editing it to 4 30-minute podcasts. If I'm reading his comment right.
Specific.
Well, what do you think? Why do you think? Like, I have a little bit of an urge to do a podcast, but it seems stronger in you. What do you think appeals about a podcast?
I think part of it is YouTube just isn't what it was for me.
Right.
And I've been starting to listen to a handful of these comic podcasts, the main ones being that Spider-Man one I mentioned earlier. And there's an X-Men one called Battle of the Atom, where they take 3 comics and they try to rank them into every X-Men comic ever. And so they have this ongoing list. So they're like, where does this
Battle
rank?
of the Atom or something like that?
Yeah.
I think you linked me to that, and I listened to one of them.
Yeah.
It wasn't bad, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd listen to every episode of that podcast.
That's fair. I mean, if you're not into X-Men,
I have to be really into X-Men, and I'm not.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I like that concept, but I mean, you have to commit to something to do something like that, and I'm not sure that's great because because of these podcasts, I started reading a lot more Spider-Man and a lot more X-Men, and I'm only getting so far, and I'm already like, God, I want to read something else. So I read The Crow,
which you like, right? I've never read it.
I have opinions about that book. I wouldn't say I liked it.
Okay.
I had fun reading it. I don't know. It's so like in my mind, like I know somewhere goth is still a thing, but in my mind, like there's this goth thing that popped up in the 90s and died. And this kind of shows part of the reason why. Like I feel with like wider.
Was The Crow published in the 90s?
Wasn't it? Pretty sure.
I don't know. I feel like goth popped up in the 80s and then died, and then it popped up in the 90s and died. It's probably popped up again, and I don't know. But
you're probably right. I'm
Comics and Stuff says hello, you all. Hello, Comics and Stuff. Do you have a channel, Comics and Stuff? Maybe I should check that out if you do.
Okay, so The Crow's first appearances in Caliber Presents 1, 1989, so before it's even officially published.
Closing in on the 90s then. For some reason, I thought it was mid-80s.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like this is something that I tip and say it's 90s because the 89 thing is like a preview. So, trying to figure out, although where's Crow number 1? Doesn't say.
J-Rox asks, are podcasts free to start like YouTube? There are places where you pay about $9 a month, I think, to get their full service, but you can get some limited service for free.
So if you want to have your podcast have potential reach at least, to be, because you have to go across iTunes, Stitcher, and probably other networks to hit, like, I use something called Podcast Addicts. You kind of need to have something that automates your delivery. Because with YouTube, you're just uploading to YouTube. You don't care about Vimeo or whatever other one, video hosting site there is. That's part of the reason why YouTube works so well. Although I guess now the competition's Twitch, right?
Twitch is apparently,
which is weird. But yeah, for podcasts, you kind of just from the start, you have this audio file and you want to push it out, and to do that, just you pay a few dollars here and there, and the difference is uncanny. It'd be kind of like if you, as a creator, if you got any more benefit out of being on YouTube Red, I guess. Be a price equivalent, but I don't think YouTube Red does anything for people uploading. It's only for.
So YouTube has been less amenable to you. What would podcasts have that YouTube doesn't? Or just a greater distance from the audience? Or less of an expectation of audience participation?
It's more. So there's a number of people, I don't know if they're the ones still on, but like there's a number of people here who've watched my videos for years, and I appreciate the hell out of people who've done that. I mean, I haven't pushed for it, I haven't worked for it, but I mean, my viewership has somewhat dropped. It's stale, but mostly I feel like I just need to shift something, because I've done YouTube for years and plodding through. I've had these phases with the channel, and I've gotten different things out of it. And I just feel like I'm kind of prodding along now, and I'm not, the stuff I used to get out of it just isn't coming through. I'm not meeting anyone new. I'm not hitting any new conversations. I feel like I just, every now and again, I reconnect with some people I've talked to before, which is always great. But like, outside of talking with you here, I haven't, done a video with anyone else in forever. I haven't had the conversation. I'm just kind of tempted to see if maybe going to a podcast, if maybe I could get more interaction with people to kind of talk comics.
Like crossover podcasts like Long Box Review does with some of his podcasting friends.
That, or I've definitely seen more Twitter interaction with people because they do a podcast. I'm wondering if there's maybe that level. Part of it too, I mean, not to spill too much, but I've been talking with someone else about trying to do a podcast, and I'll see if they even want to, because I haven't even talked with them yet. Not that I'd be opposed to doing two per se, but
I just realized I have recently subscribed to your channel, and because I subscribed to so many, the name didn't pop out at me. But I subscribed because looking at the titles of your videos, it looks like you do a lot of interesting comic book history stuff, which is really cool. So I'm looking forward to watching more of that. Sorry, Matt. I'm trying to.
No, that's totally great. I'm glad to hear there's people doing good stuff.
Comments. But so
I used to find channels
to bond with other people by teaming up with them.
Yeah. And okay, I've been dancing around this too. A big thing about YouTube that's been killing me lately is a lot of the comics I hear about or whatnot are these antagonist, like
the whole SJW political stuff.
Yeah, that on either side of it.
Right.
You got people talking about, and like a lot of people I did used to talk to, part of it's my fault, but like I've gotten into these debate, like Howler Mouse has come up. We don't talk anymore. He's blocked me. I don't necessarily blame him with a little retrospect, but like we don't talk.
Well, Howler Mouse did a cool thing because he was he did a few videos where he talked about SJWs, and then he decided not to use that term anymore.
I miss that, I guess.
That's a thing that he did, and I think it was, I'm not sure, but I think it was through conversations with friends of his outside of YouTube that made him decide to do that, because the term at one point made sense, and then it sort of stopped making sense and became just a word that gets flogged about in so many weird ways. But so I don't know, he might unblock you. But anyway, that's just a single.
Well, yeah, but I mean, the argument was about that. He had some posters like, who are these people doing all these SJW videos and stuff? And I respond basically like, dude, it's you. And there's all this proven da-da-da. And I was like, dude, you've talked about it here and there, not necessarily for a whole video here and there, but like you talk about it a chunk. And they're like, prove it. And I linked 2 videos where it was in the title and he talked about it. And he's like, well, that's 2 videos across how many? And I'm like, how many do I need to prove my point here? And it got heated.
Different people communicate in different ways. And I think to him, that probably seemed a little too antagonistic.
Oh, yeah. Which is
someone else probably talked with him about the whole SJW term in a way that communicated to him well and made him decide to stop using that term.
Probably.
But he didn't take down the old videos or anything, which I think also is good, just to leave things up. But
which is funny because I have a video that I've never made public, but he long ago was having a bum day. So I got some people together to try to do a quick little thing to be like, hey man, feel better. And and now doesn't talk. It's just funny how some of that stuff goes.
Yeah. Well, and people, it feels like, since Trump, the level of antagonism has jumped up, and people are oversensitive and feel so much tension that things feel more like attacks more quickly.
Yeah.
either in someone's head or in reality. So I feel that way, and I just don't. I love the comic book community, or whatever it is. It's, the community is sometimes an odd term, but because it was just positive, whatever people's backgrounds were, and that now there's this thread of people who just want to hammer away at things that bother them, but that they, in an obsessive way, it seems, that just makes everything feel negative. And I would, if I don't like a comic book, I might tell people, I might say the reason why, and then I move on and read something else and spend most of my time talking about comics I do like.
Yeah, but you don't keep buying the comic you don't like.
Right. Or I don't, yeah. You can point out the flaw in something and say, well, the way they do characters here is bad, but then move on and talk about the positive things in comics. The
last time I remember someone buying a comic that they didn't like that I understood was Cammie kept buying Batwoman because Batwoman was one of her favorite characters.
Right, and that was a different kind of thing.
Yeah, that's such a different thing. And she was struggling to find positive things to say, and she tried to focus there. But like, that wasn't, I'm going to roast this book.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
It was just kind of her showing her struggle with, that as a collector of buying a comic book because you have this emotional connection to it, but not being happy with the direction of it.
But I mean, like, I can't. I'm thinking back to
attacked the creators on a personal level or anything like that.
Oh God, no. Right. But I'm thinking back to like Marine Man. Like, there's some books I ripped into.
Right.
Hard. But
you rip into them once. You don't continue to come back and search for more things to.
Yeah, I'm gonna make an exception for Doomsday Clock when that's wrapped up, but beyond that, because that's such a special case.
Right. No, but you aren't going to make 2 videos a day on Doomsday Clock. It's the obsessive, repetitive, negative message that
yeah, that's part of it. It's like these people,
and even when you try not to watch these people's videos, they seem to pop up here and there, and
because the algorithm,
and it just sort of, it's in your mind, so it creates a more negative cloud around comics than there used to be.
I'll give them this: they write good headlines.
Well, and then someone got, I guess I don't want to say their name just in case it would bother them, but someone who's a huge fan of Greg Rucka, got blocked on Twitter by Greg Rucka. And I think it's because of some kind of algorithm of blocking anyone who uses certain keywords or something. And this person maybe once used the keyword in some sarcastic way.
Yeah, I mean,
so the back and forth reactions and the unintended consequences and everything on YouTube, or not just on YouTube, on the internet.
God, I can relate to that. So, I mean, I've been blocked by a few people, probably deservedly so. And I had that. So one person who blocked me was Nick Spencer, because fuck Nick Spencer. But when it was announced, or not announced, but when it was theorized that he could be the new Amazing Spider-Man writer, it's like, oh God, I'm going to be blocked by the guy who writes Amazing Spider-Man. That means I'm going to be popping into Twitter on another browser and seeing what he says every now and again.
Right.
Just like, it's already there. And I'm like, really? I don't know. I get the mentality, but, there's a reason people block you, and it's okay. It's not great. Right. If you care, but I don't know.
On the flip side, comics and stuff is writing, as far as attacking creators, once you take the time to write, pencil, ink, and publish a book, your comments should be kept to yourself, generally speaking, of course. But then he says, or should I say, until you have created a comic book, that is. So,
I'm
not sure what he's trying to say. Actually, the comments are a little confusing.
Those are two opposite.
Right. Because on one hand, one of the biggest perpetrators of this is a kind of independent comic book writer, comics, what's his name? Comics Diversity in Comics. He actually is a comics creator of sorts.
About as much as I am.
Anyway, so it's like one professional attacking other professionals on on what to me seems like an unprofessional manner. But
which is hilarious because a lot of their message is the idea that you shouldn't get so personal and talk politics with people. Otherwise, you might throw off sales. But
right.
then they're getting actually personally political, like on a one-on-one basis with them about the politics of what they're doing, but they're not specifically calling out.
And he's attacking them on not just on their politics, but on what he perceives to be their lifestyles or their physical appearances and all kinds of things.
Which is okay for some reason. Yeah, I know. Okay, we don't need to go down
but
this
as fans speaking to each other, I think we do need to talk about what we like and don't like. And I worry about worrying too much about the feelings of the creators, actually. Another reason why I don't really want to know the creators. Any creator that I know, like if in your situation of someone you were friends with before they became famous, I don't want to be in the position of criticizing my friend's comic book. So as just sort of reader to reader, that's a different experience than friend to creator or fellow creator to fellow creator.
Yeah.
But I only want to criticize the comic book, not the person making it. And I only want to criticize comic book enough to if I think it's horrible to say I think it's horrible and move on and say here's what's good.
Well, and to even give some more leeway to that, like I think if you're criticizing the creator, like I think this guy's a bad writer and here's why based with this comic or whatever,
right.
That's one thing. It's another thing to shout it at them, on social media or something versus talking to whoever's finding your video. And if they look up themselves and find your video, that's kind of on them. But to put it at them is a whole different thing.
Well, I never tweet out my videos to professionals, even if I'm praising them to the high heavens, because I might say something negative about their next comic book. I don't particularly want their attention. I want to talk with other readers.
I do too.
I think about, like you made forays into writing. I've made forays into non-comic book writing. When I think about maybe I want to try writing a comic book sometime, then I feel like, well, maybe I have to stop doing this kind of video.
Yeah. I mean, again, my foray was Kinko's publishing. I have no delusions about what it was.
But say someday you might make a foray again. It might change your relationship to this kind of channel.
Yeah.
Like if you were trying to sell to editors and find collaborators and stuff, because even if you know creative people or you've been one yourself to the point of being reviewed, they often they can be praised like crazy, and one little sentence in the review that says something negative about them will sting them for days and they'll hardly notice the praise.
Yeah, I mean that's
which is again a problem with the internet, where the people can be exposed to so much negative criticism of their creative work.
I mean that goes back to any creative thing. Like there's stories written about that itself. They focus on the negative as opposed to the positive bits of criticism, where you get that one bad review and it craws at you because it's human nature to kind of focus on the negative.
Exactly. And for some people maybe more than others, but yeah, it's definitely human nature. And I don't blame creators for feeling sensitive when they get criticized, because they have put a huge amount of work. Even a mediocre, what to me is a mediocre comic, may have been many months out of someone's life, where they poured their best into it at the time.
I'm trying to think. There's only one incident I really had with Wednesday's Serial with this was Zenoscope put out Robin Hood with a Y. Some bussy chick slinging arrows at people. I only bought the first issue.
I've often thought about buying those comics and never actually managed to do it yet.
Well, you have a daughter, I understand.
Well, even before, but
Yeah.
I'm saying I might someday. So, but I want to hear. I'm interested to hear what you're going to say.
Well, the writer of that comic, like, through whatever means, I mean, because what did I put down? I think I had the name and the keywords maybe in the description. Must have been through that. Like, he had to have been hunting, because my video was not the first coming up. He watched it and he commented and he said, "Oh, well, you think this, but like you need to stay on." Like, he kind of rebutted my review, and I remember sitting there being like, "What the fuck do I say?" Because, like, dude, I did not like your comic. I am not reading. I'm not paying for the second issue, because my problem with it was, like, they were trying to do this Robin Hood in a modern day thing, but like her motivation was she got raped and she wanted revenge, and it was like graphic, and I was like, I don't think this is cool. Like, it's justified in a way for the story because it's dark, but I'm like, I don't want to, like, y'all, I'm good. And he made this point, like, no, it's justified and da da da, and you just need to press on. I'm just like, dude, no, it was a flinch test, and I flinched. I
Right,
didn't.
and no professional creator should try to rebut their critics, particularly their amateur critics. So that was kind of an amateur mistake on his own part.
Well, and I remember when I was talking about,
No-win
like,
situation for them to try to rebut someone's criticism of them.
maybe I'd have to go back to it, but at least in my mind, I remember putting it in a way that was like, I don't think this is good. Like, I would not recommend this, but I also put a bit of, like, a lot of this is my personal taste barrier, but I mean, being uncomfortable with rape, that is most of the comic, I think is, like, that's not just like, oh, I didn't like this because of whatever. Like, you probably won't too.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of little bits of negative things have happened in the background of comic book YouTube, as you know, or the things I've experienced because we've chatted about them. But it's only recently that it's had a more negative general feeling to it, I guess.
Well, we used to know everyone.
Well,
Like,
there's
on some
that.
level, like, you made a video with someone, then something went sideways somewhere else, and you'd hear about it and you comment. Like, it was a community. Now it's like some a-hole on YouTube that's somewhat related because he talks about comics and that's it, is having this tirade and getting, thousands of views, and you're kind of like, I feel like that old school connection, but I'm like, it's not there. This guy doesn't know me. He doesn't care about the fact I made videos years before he did. Why would he? And he's just like, there's no point in which we'd agree on much. So I don't know. It's just someone else on YouTube.
Well, but there's still, if you're looking, you can still find some people who are simpatico on some levels or others, but
there's definitely people who align more with that, but I've heard their videos and I find them more agreeable, I guess you could say, but no.
Well, it's always been the case that for each person that I like on YouTube, there's areas of intersection, but there's no one out there who's completely like me.
Oh no,
and likes all the things I like, or discusses things in the same way that I do.
I'm not even saying like same way or same things or same taste. I'm saying like life practices that I don't find abhorrent in some way. Like,
well, you can mostly avoid abhorrent people, but
right. It's just gotten harder lately.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have someone else that you want to do a podcast with. So I don't even know if that's if I should
you want
worry
to do
about
something, if you want to do something, I'm sure we can work something out. I can't imagine that would be a problem.
Well, and I am problematic time-wise.
Yeah, if we were doing something, I somehow doubt it would be every week anyways. So
Well, or if I told my wife I was going to do something every week or every other week, she'd be fine with that. But it eventually means I would have to do other things at other times so that it would, I don't know. The beauty of doing YouTube by myself is I literally can say, okay, I have 20 minutes free now. I've just discovered I have 20 minutes free now. I'll go do it now.
mm-hmm. You don't have to schedule.
That's why I'm not on any group videos either, amongst other reasons. But
yeah, no, there's no coordination. There's none of that. It's a different thing. I feel you. Like I plan on doing another spider video this weekend. I don't know when, but when I want to, I'll do it. I just need to read books first. Which is funny. YouTube's starting to really influence my reading habits again. Like I used to just read when I read and talk about it. Now I'm like, okay, well I did Wednesday's serial, so now if I want to do spider talk, I put off reading my spider books so I can do that and then do the video.
Yeah, I try to avoid deciding I'm going to do a series of things because then that does keep me from, like, I keep thinking, oh, I'm going to do a series of videos on new gods and the fourth world stuff, since I've got that giant omnibus I'm trying to read. Mm-hmm. But then that means I have to keep reading it, whereas I read a few issues of it and then I switched over to reading my new comics, and then I started reading some 1970s Captain America. So yeah,
most of my ill-promised videos, like with Deadman, I mean, have been surrounding Ed. I think like he's asked for more videos that I haven't delivered than with anyone else, and it's because it's these videos that I know if I put up, he'll be one of 5 people watching.
You get more than 5 people, but
sometimes.
Really? I'm going to look at your channel right now.
Oh my god. But I don't know, like Spider Chat, I'm going to read those books anyways. I want to stay current for me, and so then I just talk about it. It's not a thing. Whereas like Deadman, because suddenly Deadman became homework, I put it off, but then I'll read, a Punisher run or read The Crow or whatever it is.
The lowest number of views I'm seeing at a glance is 39.
All right.
Oh,
it's pretty low.
It's probably much lower than it used to be, huh?
Oh yeah.
But you have higher, you have videos over 100 views. Here's one with 353 views from 2 years ago. I think there's just less people per comic book video for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think a lot of it's the algorithms too. Like, I mean, I'm sure I used to pop up if someone watched one of your videos, the chance of one of my videos being the side probably used to be possible, and now probably not.
Maybe. I'm not sure if those algorithms are that bad. I don't know. I seem to keep finding stuff.
Yeah.
Like I can't remember how I found comics and stuff, but I recently subscribed to his channel. Very recently, I think. Wow, look at that. 2 years ago, you had a Gail Simone's run of Deadpool/Agent X video.
That was with Travis and Stacy.
Right, and it got 338 views.
That's when Travis was king.
When Travis, oh, you think Travis is the one who pulled in people?
Yeah. That and Stacy, I think at the time. That was probably the height of her popularity too.
You got 125 views on a video about Descender.
Descender. I don't even remember that.
Sorry, I don't mean to expose your numbers of views and stuff, but it's just funny because I think there just were more viewers then. I don't know if it's the algorithms, because there's just so many comic book channels now.
Yeah. Well, there's that. I don't know. Part of it too is I've been more sensitive since was it Captain Cummings called me on it that I was getting views. He got me.
Yeah, well, Captain Cummings has a whole new life. There was a time when he had less views than you, but now he's
those days are done.
long gone.
Yeah.
And I assume he has a bunch of new friends, but he doesn't have his old friends. That's, you know, he's got a different lifestyle as a YouTuber than he used to.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, it's very late, so we've been on for probably nearly 3 hours. So
that's a good chunk right there, right?
I'm not picking on Matt. I have lost, I think, an average of 100 less viewers per video year by year. So a year ago, I think I had 100 more, and on average 100 more views per video than I do now. But I still have plenty of views, and I get plenty of comments, and I leave lots of comments, and that's part of why you
Oh, no doubt. I'm not engaging.
It's not just algorithms. I think it's your own participation in a conversation is less.
It is. I mean, it used to be a lot easier, so I used to do it, and
Right.
It feels like work to do it now, and so I don't.
Right. So I can see the urge to do a podcast, but on the other hand, it sounds like more work. So I'm just torn.
Yeah. I don't know. Someone's doing something new, I guess. Yeah, man. I don't know. Ain't what she used to be.
A bunch of toadies or a bunch of toads. I'm not sure which, but I'm responding to a comment by 64-page special. So we will sign off now. Thanks so much to all the people who've been here chatting. Comics and I guess we've been on so long, but Comics and Stuff and J Rocks and 64-page special and Laser Duchamp and Oracle 684. I think I'm new to you. Max Washington Songs. And earlier we had Edward was here. It was a delight to have him. Comic Book Aesthete. Wonderful that he was able to drop by. Bad Avenger, the Omnitron, Jack Yo. So Thomas Churchill. Thanks to everyone who RB3. I mean, really, see, we've had a lot of people interacting with us, and that's really what makes this fun, along with interacting with each other. So thanks, everyone. And Wednesday Serial out.
Woo.